Hi everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. This show is on every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2100 hours Central European Time. My name is Geerte Frenken, and this show is all about the topic of protective mothers and their children. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive father by many means necessary, which is an uphill battle in today's global corrupt family court system that thrives on paternal entitlement. And this show we're going to do a little bit different. We're going to have Mel V actually interview me for a change. So welcome to the show, Mel V, and I'm turning the whole thing over to you.
Thank you, Geerte. Thank you for having me with you for your show, and I do want to say hello to everybody and thank you for tuning in. It is an absolute privilege to be chatting with Geerte, who has become such a valuable part of the CCN family and really an amazing social justice campaigner who we've had the greatest privilege to support in the media capacity and work with over the last year. We've been with us almost 6 months now, I think, and it's been fantastic. We've learned so much from you, and you've shown us such a high standard of tenacity, but also dedication to the cause. And I think that it's a real symbol of strength and a lot of courage that comes with what you're doing. And for me, you epitomize everything that when we set out as a network, you're the type of people that we wanted to be working with and supporting. And in every way, you are so genuine in your pursuit and so dedicated. And from our point of view, during this project and the way that we do it, we can ask nothing more of people that we work with than for that kind of commitment and, sincerity within what they're doing. And when you've suffered and you've gone through hardships and the ultimate suffering, I think, is the loss of a child through unfair circumstances or to watch a child suffer unnecessarily. I think that must be one of the greatest sufferings that any parent can go through, and then to rise above it and to come forward and to, be able to take this on, not just for your own cause and for your own daughter, but also for so many other people out there, providing a platform and a cool, logical approach to this that's non-hysterical, that's not overly emotional, so that people can actually really focus on the fact and not get swept up on the emotion. And that has been such an important representation from what we've witnessed of your work. And I really today glad we've got the opportunity to talk, and I want to get a better understanding of a little bit about your background and kind of how you came to be on this journey, communicating this information, and a little bit about, what's happened to you and your story at this particular time.
Well, I lived in the United States from 1988 through 2012. I'm currently back in the Netherlands. I'm originally Dutch, and for the last 10 years or so, I've been working as a college professor in visual communication and international communication. And unfortunately, my daughter got caught up in the international global family court system, and she was deported unlawfully from the Netherlands to the United States in 2014, despite the fact that a lot of expert evidence was presented to the court that her father had molested her and neglected her and abused her, and despite the fact that he admitted to the court that he had a serious drug addiction to heroin and crack cocaine, and despite the fact that he had hacked my bank account and my email account and had collaborated with a child trafficking federation. All of this was presented to the court, and nevertheless she was deported, and the way that went down was completely unlawful. And once this all went down, I started connecting on Facebook with other mothers who had gone through similar situations. And I found out that there was an entire hidden epidemic of mothers, thousands of mothers in Facebook groups um, dealing with the same situations. In fact, from the thousands of mothers that I met, I noticed that all our stories were essentially the same. They followed the same script. And I started researching this. I started trying to figure out, well, why does this happen? How does it happen? And what can we do about it? And I've been doing a lot of research in the last 2.5 years or so on this topic, and started collecting it and kind of, putting the dots together. And today I want to present with the audience what my findings are, and hopefully bring awareness to this big global plight of ours, because that's the only way that we can reach policymakers and hopefully also the judges and attorneys that are involved in this judicial child trafficking, because that's really what we're dealing with here. So let me get started with all of that. So I already explained what a protective mother is, right? A protective mother is a mother who has a child with an abusive partner, who before, during, or after the divorce finds that her abusive partner threatens to take full custody of her child or children. And in many, if not most cases, there's child abuse involved. And let me share my screen here, and we'll look at this picture of, how I see the protective mothers who are fighting this, because during the last 35 years or so in the United States, fathers have organized themselves in so-called fathers' rights groups. And unfortunately, many of these so-called fathers' rights groups are infiltrated by abusive fathers who have concocted a judicial formula to sever the mother-child bond in an act of revenge against the mothers of their children for leaving them, as a way to continue to abuse and molest their kids, as a way to avoid paying child support, and then judicially coerce the mothers to pay them child support instead, all in an act of ultimate coercive control. Now, we know that about 50% of all marriages end up in divorce. And according to the Child Ombudsman in the Netherlands here, 25% of those divorces end up in real nasty custody battles. And according to academic research, there is a clear war on mothers and children, particularly in the United States, which is supported by corruption in the judicial system through federal fatherhood funding. That's not to say that non-abusive fathers are not also affected by corrupt U.S. family courts, but it happens to them in much smaller numbers. The estimate is about 25%, and they usually still end up with shared custody. 85% of all abusive fathers are granted full custody. Now, you can find that here on this website. There is a ton of research here. This is all academic research that confirms these numbers. So everything that I'm sharing with you today, Mel, and with the audience, is all backed up by research. So this is not something that I'm making up. And there are fathers who will say, like, oh, well, this is funded by mothers, but there is no motherhood.gov. However, there is fatherhood.gov. So there is no financial incentives for, there's hundreds of links on here. You can just scroll through this. It's endless. There's no financial incentive for the mothers to fund this. As a matter of fact, the mothers don't have a dime. And we'll get to that in a second. The federally funded pro-abuse industry awards abusive, vengeful fathers custody of our kids, and it functions like a corporation that profits from its victims. And I have here the vengeful father syndrome here on the Mothers of Lost Children site. that describes the hallmarks of recognizing a vengeful father. The essence is control and domination, lack of emotion and effective responses, lack of empathy, compassion, and remorse, obsessively determined to win in any form of contest, particularly in court proceedings, deceit, cunning, and manipulation, grooming and manipulating authority figures and professionals, and then, of course, blaming the victim. In short, this scheme that these fathers have concocted is a 5-step formula. And I will discuss these 5 steps in depth a little later, but basically what it comes down to is that in step one, we have the situation where the child reports child abuse or molestation or neglect to a teacher or to the mother or to whoever. And it then is the responsibility of the mother to report this. So she will go and report this to the police or to Child Protective Services or the court, and is then accused of lying and labeled with parental alienation syndrome or mental instability or any other type of false allegations. In other words, the mothers are not believed, not even if they have expert evidence of abuse. Now, that is step 2. So in step 3, the mother then enters the system, and there is an entire system of financial siphoning that starts kicking in. The fathers will start vexatiously litigating in family court with these false allegations of parental alienation syndrome, mental instability. Whatever sticks to the wall, they will throw it at you. And the courts don't weigh the evidence. They base their decisions on opinion, which is really important to realize. So the mothers are then caught into this situation where they're paying for attorneys and they have to do custody evaluations and they're paying for guardian ad litems and mediators, and in the meantime they're severely traumatized because their children are getting abused. Usually the fathers are put on visitation in step 3, but in step 4 what you get is that the children usually continue to be molested and abused during visitation. So here we go, the mother starts reporting the abuse again, and once again she is accused of parental alienation syndrome. She then loses custody, and now she is the one placed on supervised visitation. That usually erodes into a no contact situation, whether that's by court order or without court order. And the mother is then ordered to pay child support, the father's attorney's fees, her own attorney's fees, the guardian ad litems, the supervised visitation, and it completely depletes the moms. And these moms now suffer from severe post-traumatic stress disorder as they've lost their kids, and now they're also losing their homes. This is affecting their careers, their jobs. They're unable to pay usually, and sometimes they even get jailed when they're unable to pay, or even gagged by the court when they try to blow the whistle on their case. And their environments don't understand the family court scam, so they become isolated with their family and friends too. And then we go to step 5, because the nightmare doesn't end here. The abusive fathers then continue to stalk and slander and harass the mother to completely isolate her, to drive her into poverty. They brainwash the kids to hate the moms. They even enroll the children in special brainwash therapy and camps. And again, the mothers are jailed when they try to resist, or they're gagged. Yeah. The ultimate aim of these domestic terrorists is for the moms to commit suicide. I don't see another reason why they would be doing this. Now, this 5-step scenario happens in about 80% of all the cases that involve abusive fathers. And in case of child sexual abuse, the percentage actually goes up to 85%. Now I want to share with you one of the best articles that's written on this topic, on the particular topic of judicial child sex trafficking, and that's this, Pedophilia in the Justice System by Keith Harmon Snow. If anyone would ever go and research this topic, I would highly recommend this article. As you can see, these fathers' rights people have handbooks of hate in which they share that 5-step formula with each other. Keith Harmon Snow actually wrote a book on this. It's called The Worst Interest of the Child, the Trafficking of Children and Parents Through U.S. Family Courts. I highly recommend this. It's very important that everyone gets a good idea on what's going on. So I'm not the only one who's sharing this information, obviously. Now, this father's rights agenda in the United States is federally funded. You can check that here. Here we got fatherhood.gov. Now, mind you, there is no motherhood.gov. So this federal funding by itself is completely a form of discrimination. I can't put it in any other way. And here on this website, Maccabees, in the research section, you can see that this federal funding goes to a lot of different agencies in the United States. So we got the AFCC, the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. We got the HHS, the Health and Human Services. It's incredibly dangerous to women and children, this funding. You can read this article here in the Huffington Post on that topic. We got the CRC, the Children's Rights Council, the CPR, the Center for Policy Research, the OCSE, the Office of Child Support Enforcement, and TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Now, all of these organizations get money, okay? These fathers' rights programs are completely out of control. This is another article on it. It describes all these organizations, these national organizations that I just mentioned that get fatherhood funding, okay? It's so out of control, in fact, that they even push for convicted murderers and rapists to get full custody of kids. One such case that I've come across is Jen Goodwin, who I interviewed on Hells for Children when it was still a radio show. And you can find her interview that I did on my website, freejasmine.com, with the Dutch spelling of her name. If you go here in media and go to Blog Talk Radio, you'll find the archives here. And you'll find the case of Jen Goodwin, which is the pinnacle of absurdity, because Jen's ex-husband actually beat a man to death with his bare hands. He spent time in jail, and upon release, he was granted full custody of their son due to this federal funding of ex-convicts to get full custody. In another case that I know, a rape victim who gave birth was forced to live in a 10-mile radius of the jail that housed the rapist and was forced to visit him weekly with the child in order to give the rapist a visitation with the child. I mean, this is completely and utterly out of control. And this is what we need, what we're facing. This is what we're up against. So over the last 30 years or so, the Fathers' Rights 5-step formula has spread like a virus, and the severing of the mother-child bond is now happening at a global scale. It has reached pandemic proportions. And this US and UN agenda of terror has achieved global reach with specifically severe results in the United States, in Canada, in Brazil, in Australia, in New Zealand, and all over Europe. And you've already seen the US research that I just shared that shows that 82% of abusive fathers get awarded full custody of their kids, which amounts to 85,000 children per year getting placed in full custody of abusive fathers in the United States alone. Now, researchers have concluded that this number is very, very conservative. So I want to mention that. And here is another article that you can read that has those research numbers. Now, again, this is not, this research is not funded by mothers. It's total nonsense. I would like to see evidence of that. I have never, fathers' rights people will say that to me. I have not seen any evidence of that. If you cannot back up your statements with evidence, then your argument is unfounded. So let's stay with that very conservative number of 85,000 children that are placed in full custody of abusive fathers, and we tally it up over the 35 years or so that this has been going on, then we can easily arrive at a possible total of 2 million protective mothers who have lost custody to abusive fathers, and that's in the United States alone. My global estimate, because I have contact with mothers all over the world, is that we're at about 8 million worldwide. So let's take a look at this, this father's rights formula in depth a little bit. And I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking here with my computer. And we need to also, while we're discussing this 5-step formula, think about child protective services and law enforcement and why are they not doing anything, right? Because the general belief is that mothers are fabricating stories of child abuse, but research actually shows that this only occurs in an extremely low percentage of so-called high conflict child custody cases, which is to be estimated to only be about 2%. And child psychiatrists can easily detect coaching by mothers who fabricate abuse through forensic testing, nonverbal testing, neurological testing. And just on that term, I don't like that term high conflict. What we're dealing with here is domestic terrorism, and it is supported by greedy attorneys, guardian ad litems, therapists, judges, and other court and CPS players, and the entire agenda is rooted in paternal entitlement. That's what it comes down to. So let's go into depth into these 5 steps and how it's really done. When a mother tries to protect her child, we know that the abusive father starts a custody case in family court where he accuses the mother of what's called parental alienation syndrome. Now, this is a term that was coined by Richard Gardner, and I'm going to show you here a website. Let me share my screen. Richard Gardner was a forensic psychiatrist in the early 80s, and he came up with that parental alienation syndrome term. And it is an unsophisticated pseudoscientific theory that blames protective mothers for child estrangement from the father. Now, Richard Gardner actually promoted fathers to have sex with their kids. He was a pedophile. He caused a global court agenda where children and mothers reporting pedophilia, reporting child molestation by fathers to get accused of lying and accused of parental alienation syndrome. The stuff that he's saying here, these are a couple of quotes of this man. He believed that, pedophilia was normal, and that the mother should not interfere. This man stabbed himself to death due to the misery that he caused millions of mothers and their children. He stabbed himself in the heart 7 times, and well, good riddance is all I can say to that. Now, again, fabrication of child abuse can be fairly easily detected by child psychiatrists. In reality, it is actually usually the abusive father that fabricates lies about the mothers, such as mental disorders, drug addiction, inability to take care of the kids. They make up all kinds of stuff. And the judges rule on opinion. They don't rule on evidence. I've actually seen in my own case that the judge didn't even look at the evidence that was submitted with the motions. They just read a bunch. I think these judges are also very overwhelmed. It's a system that's not thorough by any means. Now, let's look at Dr. Saunders of the Department of Justice, because he, in fact, is the expert that concluded that fathers are 16 times more likely to lie about abuse than mothers. You can find that article here. So then we go to step 2. Even though this parental alienation syndrome has proven to be a hoax and Richard Gardner is a pedophile, family court judges still act upon his theory despite this research by Dr. Saunders from the Department of Justice. Why? Well, some activists claim that judges and attorneys and guardian ad litems and mediators and supervisors need to be educated about domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism being domestic violence, coercive control, narcissism, sociopathy, and legal abuse as well, right? Legal abuse is nothing but domestic violence by proxy. There are other activists who claim that the agenda is more sinister. Let's take a look at one of my interpretations of it, namely that judges, attorneys, guardian ad litems, evaluators, supervisors, and all other court-involved personnel can set their own outrageous hourly fees and profit financially from placing a child in full custody of an abusive father. In the U.S., there are no pro bono family court attorneys. So all these court professionals love family conflicts. In fact, it's how they make money, and the fees they set are not regulated. So they make lots of money, and the longer the case drags on in court, the more money is made. Biggie, can you please show us clip number 1?
It's who you know and how much money you have. It doesn't have anything to do with the law. It doesn't have anything to do with justice.
The financial incentives are to keep these situations going. There's no financial incentive to settle the case. The evaluators make a ton of money. The attorneys for the minor and the family court attorneys are guaranteed payment for, if the child's 3 years old, for the next 15 years. Because they never settle. These cases never settle.
If a child is placed in unsupervised visitation or full custody with the person that they've identified as the perpetrator of abuse, you know instantly that their protective parent is never going to just walk away and stop fighting for their safety.
There's a pattern to the cases. What we found is we can finish someone's sentence when they call us. We know what the next step in the pattern is.
If there's money in the family, they'll appoint an evaluator. And first it will go to court mediation. If there's enough money, they'll recommend private mediation. Typically, they'll appoint a parenting coordinator, a parenting coach, a therapist for each family member, and the amounts that these people can charge are not regulated at all.
All these people that are making hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars statewide off of the whole family law machine, they want the court to make those orders because those orders are what get them paid, and it's the reason for their existence.
Much of the money comes from the litigants. That's the chilling part of it.
That's money. That's money buying something we label as truth and justice, where it's not money buying truth or justice. It's money buying, in some cases, lies, really damaging lies with long-term consequences.
So Child and Family Services, also called CPS, is often either maxed out in their capacity to investigate all these cases, or they're in cahoots with family courts because their organization actually profits from federal dollars for every child that passes through their system. CPS is widely known to sex traffic children.
In 1974, Walter Mondale proposed the Adoption and Safe Families Act, which was then passed, starting the catalyst of the financial incentive for states to legally kidnap children. Expanded in 1997 by President Bill Clinton by Bill H.R. 867, it finalized the Safe Families Act for cash bonuses awarded by the state to remove children from the home and put them into foster care placement. This led to an epidemic not just in the United States but in countries around the world to wrongfully remove children from the family home. These are their stories.
Well, my name is Nancy Schaefer, and I'm from the state of Georgia in the United States. I will share with you on the unlimited power of Child Protective Services. I served in the Georgia State Senate, and after 4 years of viewing the ruthless and unsparing actions of Child Protective Services, also called CPS, which I will use tonight, I wrote a scathing report entitled "The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services." The report cost me my Senate seat. However, there are causes worth losing over, and this is one.
Now, Georgia Senator Nancy Schaefer, during the time that she was a senator, she found out that CPS is trafficking children, and she blew the whistle on this. She went all over the country and actually all over the world to speak about the terror that was happening within Child Protective Services, and the fact that they were just trafficking these children without any, there was no reason to remove these children from their parents. And she investigated this and found out that it was a racketeering scheme, and still is. Unfortunately, she was murdered due to the work that she did, and so was her husband. And of course, in the media, they said it was a murder-suicide. I don't think so. And most people who looked into this know that she was murdered for what she uncovered, because we'll get into this later. There's so much money involved. It is outrageous. So we're still in step 2, right? We're still at the point where the mother has reported evidence of child abuse, molestation, neglect, and CPS fails to protect these kids. And the judge then awards the father's unsupervised access to their kids during visitation. And the child abuse usually continues during visitation. And then the kids report the abuse that takes place. And then the mothers report this to CPS again. And once again, the moms are blamed of parental alienation. As a matter of fact, the more evidence she brings in of the abuse, the more she will get blamed of parental alienation. So in step 3, the case goes back to court, And then often the parents are asked to go through what's called a custody evaluation by a court-appointed psychologist. Now, mind you, most of these evaluators are in the fatherhood funding scheme as well. And what they do during these custody evaluations, and I'll share this. This is from Dr. Saunders from the Department of Justice. He concluded in his research findings that the MMPI tests that are conducted during these custody evaluations are not made for the populations seen in custody courts because they do not provide screening tools like the Campbell Danger Assessment Test to detect coercive controlling behavior and other forms of domestic violence, including domestic violence by proxy through legal abuse. And the study quotes, "Generally, psychological testing is not appropriate in domestic violence situations. Such testing may misdiagnose the non-abusive parent's normal response to the abuse or violence as demonstrating mental illness, effectively shifting the focus away from the assaultive and coercive behaviors of the abusive parent." So the mothers are often incorrectly diagnosed as mentally unstable due to incorrect testing. And also, many inappropriate individuals are placed in positions of deciding who is the most, who is the fittest parent. All right, here we have an article that states, would you pay this man $7,500 to decide whether he would be the best parent for your kids? This man puts pictures on his Facebook page in bondage gear, completely inappropriate, leather and chains. You know, this is the type of stuff. I mean, you know, these are the types of people that are deciding what's happening to your kids. I mean, it's out of control. So here we have step 3, you know, the father's attorney, the evaluators, and CPS present their false claims to the court in order to traffic the kids via the family court system. And again, the courts don't look at the evidence. They base their decisions on opinion. So the parent who throws the most mud, who slings the most mud, is the one who gets away with murder, literally. I'm going to share my screen here because on the topic of lies that are shared in court, of course, a lot of people are trying to change that, and this is one of them.
Hi, this is Kathleen Arthur again, and I'm on the 3rd floor of the Russell Building, and I have seen all of the legislative aides on floors 1 through 3, and I have played them the clip of the social worker right to lie federal case number 15-55563, and I have given them the news article, the one and only news article about our social workers' right to lie case. This case is one step away from the Supreme Court. And the question is, do social workers have the constitutional right to lie? And if they plant evidence and lie, are they immune from this or not? This is being heard in our federal court. The closing arguments have been done, and now they are awaiting the decision. If the federal court decides to go ahead and allow this, that means that our social workers, they're going to set the precedent all over America that the social workers have the constitutional right to lie, commit perjury, plant evidence, and take your child. That is exactly what this case is about. There has been one news article on this issue. This is a fundamental right to parent issue, and our news medias are not doing a good job on it. Our news medias have turned into a gossip column. I'm surrounded by them here. They're all over the place. And what are they covering? They're covering Donald Trump. They're covering Hillary Clinton. But they're not covering the fact that our government is stealing our children and have the right to lie. They have the right to take our children, and we have no recourse because the social workers are immune. So I've gone to all the senators on the first, second, and third floor in the Russell Building, and they are appalled. I played them the clip on the right to lie case, which is a federal case, one step away from the Supreme Court. None of them have even heard of this. They're relying on their news from the media, who's covering gossip, but they're not covering real news that's going to affect people. And so anyway, so that's why I'm here. I hopped a plane from Washington. I have the federal court case clip, and I've got the news article, and I'm going door to door, and they are horrified. They cannot believe it, and they can't believe they haven't heard of this. So I'm going to keep going on it, and I'm going to report some real news. Not how Trump's doing today, not how Hillary is doing today. I'm going to report stuff like, do social workers have the constitutional right to lie and plant evidence to take your children? Boy, that's a federal court case issue. It's gotten that bad to where hearsay, which is allowed in family court, has evolved into a right to lie for social workers and plant evidence. So that's real news, and that's what I'm going to be here taking care of. It's my only mission. I've come with a big problem, but I have two solutions that will take care of it. Number one is we must remove hearsay for family court. Hearsay is not allowed in federal court or in criminal court, but hearsay, which is basically the right to lie, is allowed in family court, and that has evolved into this horrific situation where now social workers they're targeting poor children who qualify for 4E and disabled for removal from their home and adoption. It's a form of legal kidnapping. So I'm here. I got one more floor to do. I'm going to do the heart tomorrow probably. But anyway, I'm mad as hell, and I'm going to get this out to them, and we got to stop them from being able to steal our children. So I'm still working. Well, see you later. Bye.
And we are making headway. We have just, the Protective Mother in California just won a case against a lying social worker. So we're in step 3, where the judge awards full custody to the abusive father. It's pretty outrageous, but this is what happens. Imagine being a mother trying to protect your child from an abusive father. You're dealing with this, you know. There are no good judges anymore. And now the mothers have to pay the father's child support and the attorney's fees and the guardian ad litem and their own attorney who supposedly acts for the mom, but totally is in cahoots with the other attorneys. And of course, all these individuals have the financial incentive to keep the status quo going, you know, to keep the abusive father from losing custody of the kids. And the mothers get placed on supervised visitation, which they also have to pay for. So supervised visitation is another racket. And I'll share my screen here, and you can see that these supervisors can get a license within a 24-hour certificate training. They can set their own outrageous hourly fees as well. I've seen cases where supervisors demanded $1,500 per visit, knowing full well that the mother would not be able to afford that. In my own case, I was asked to pay a $5,000 retainer just to Skype with my daughter 1 hour a week. So out of control. Now, let's say the mother is able to somehow pull that insane amount of money together for these supervised visits. The abusive fathers in cahoots with supervisors then make up allegations of inappropriate behavior of the mother during visitation. At which point, usually all the contact is cut. And I know a lot of mothers who have not had any contact with their children, sometimes for years in a row. That is pretty gross and outrageous. I mean, you know, think about it. What kind of father wouldn't want their child to have a mother? You know, I mean, really, what is this? In step 4, you know, at this point, the mothers have been financially devastated by out of control legal fees to court evaluators, guardian ad litem, supervisors, child support, the father's attorney's fees, their own lawyers who promise them to get the kids back and usually only lead the moms on until they're financially depleted. The average amount that a mother spends in family litigation is $100,000, and I'll share my research findings here. This is a Protective Parent Survey, a project from 2012. You can find it on my website. If you go to page 2, it will show you here that many mothers file for bankruptcy, and the model average is $100,000 in litigation. That said, I have seen mothers spend up to $4 million all to no avail. I mean, even celebrities with lots of money will end up losing custody and even losing contact, right? So let's take a look at the father's rights agenda. We already saw that horrible book that I shared in the article of Keith Harmon Snow. But they basically, I mean, they teach each other how to do this, right? I mean, this is a formula that they share with each other. This is abusersgettingcustody.blogspot. And if you scroll down here, it'll just show you what they tell each other. There's a couple of pointers that they have. Get an aggressive lawyer. Use the court system to wear down your ex. Keep the playing field uneven, you know. Of course, they love it if the mother doesn't have an attorney. Gives them a huge advantage. Harass your ex, both in person and via the court system. Cause your kids to bond with people in your camp so the judge will think twice about taking them away from their new loving relationships. Make it look like your kids' lives suck, you know. Make your ex look crazy. Make the mother of your children appear to be a shiftless, drunken, drug-crazed slut. And take a tip from Coppolas, the conversation, and record all your phone conversations with your ex and your children. And, you know, when the time is due for the custody evaluation time, you get a hired gun psychologist to counter the court's femi-Nazi social worker. I mean, this is the type of language that they use. Get your hired psychologist to ask your kids leading questions about how unfit mama is. It goes on and on and on. Let's go and take a look at another YouTube clip. Biggie, can you play clip 4, please?
I want to thank you, deviant lawyer, for taking my pathetic case.
No problem, Mr. Abuser. I am always willing to help out a criminal who attempted to kill his wife. For the right price, that is. Now, you stated on the phone that you had beat your wife several times in the marriage. Was she ever treated in the hospital?
Yes, she was. And she has all the records from it. She also has a protective order on me, so that I can't come near her, or the kid she claims I helped make. I can't be sure it's mine. I was too drunk to remember banging my wife.
It doesn't matter if the child is yours. If we attempt to take the child away from her and place her in your custody, you will still be able to abuse and control the mom, all while draining her savings account and wearing her down. It is a win-win situation for you.
How do I get custody of the girl? Won't the judge look at the police reports?
Yes, he certainly will. But we will spin it with a tissue of lies. We will claim that the mother is over-paranoid and crazy, that she fabricated her injuries or even caused them herself. We will ask the judge for an evaluation from a good psychiatrist friend of mine. He always makes sure the dad maintains custody and control so that you will still be able to abuse the mom, and has the added bonus of not having to give her child support. Does this sound good to you?
Yes. I don't want to give that woman a dime of my money. I will pay you thousands and thousands of dollars to make sure she doesn't see the $150 a month she would probably be awarded.
And I will gladly take your money. Now, tell me how long you were married.
We were married about 5 years. I lured her in, very quickly, by pretending to be a nice guy, and then when she was finally duped sufficiently, I married her, and immediately began beating her. After every incident, I always made sure to tell her I loved her, and that it would never happen again. This is all her fault for being stupid enough to believe me. I also threatened to kill her if she ever left me, and then I made sure there was no money available for her birth control, so that she would eventually get pregnant and be trapped by me forever. I really love the sound of her crying in pain, and don't think I can live without torturing her. It is wonderful having the kid now. I can torture her as well. I got 2 for the price of 1.
And I will make sure you can continue your lifestyle so that your wife will still make you happy with her misery. Can you bait her into yelling at you?
Of course I can. I know how to push all her buttons.
That's great. Then we can get her to act out emotionally in public. Then you can call the cops on her and pretend you were in fear of your life. We can get a restraining order on her and level the playing field. Once the forensic evaluator performs his test on both of you, then we'll really be able to make her look crazy.
But won't I fail the test, because I'm a narcissistic sociopath who loves to torture and humiliate my wife and child?
No, you won't fail. These behaviors can be excused with a little term called alienation. It works every time. We can say she was alienating you from the child, and because you could not see your child you were forced to act out this way. Hey, it worked for Alec Baldwin, it will work for us. Plus, you have to remember that the judge appoints this same evaluator every time, and he is for father's rights. It doesn't matter to us if you eventually kill your child. All that matters is that we all make money off your vengeance and your wife's fears.
That's wonderful. Then I can still make my wife cry, make my daughter do whatever I say, and still have the freedom to drink whenever I want. You were right, this is a win-win situation. Thank you, deviant lawyer.
So in the meantime, the judge makes about $200,000 a year. You can just check this on salary.com. You know, this information is all out there. The state of California alone employs 15,000 California court employees who rake in more than $1 billion in salaries, and it's all paid for by your tax dollars. You can find that article over here. Multiply that $1 billion in salary in California alone with 2 states, and it's clear that this is a multi-billion-dollar Kids for Cash scheme that functions like a corporation, which is also exploited by the pedophile mafia. I mean, after all, most child pornography is produced by fathers who have gained full custody of their kids. Judicial sex trafficking is rampant. Children are purposefully placed in the custody of registered sex offenders and identified child molesters. And like I told you, Mel, my case is one of those examples. Many of the protective mothers deal with child molesting fathers, as you can also see in the many interviews I've done with protective mothers. I've interviewed a bunch of these mothers on my show, and you can find the archives of the show on the CCN website here. When you go to ccn.media and you go to Hells for Children, you can find all these interviews, and many of these mothers had expert evidence of child molestation. I mean, it's just endless. So let's look at one of those cases that's real outrageous. Lisa Knight. Lisa Knight's daughter was trafficked to a pedophile, and the judge conveniently sealed the records after the dirty deal was done. How about that? Again, there are literally millions of cases like this. Pedophilia is rife, and like I said, most child pornography is created by fathers who have full custody of their kids. And even rapists routinely get parental rights of children born out of rape. Yes, it even goes that far. And you know, this is nothing new. As a matter of fact, mainstream media has reported on this. There was a interview, a documentary done by Lisa Ling on CNN about a rape survivor's custody battle for her child. She is forced to co-parent with her rapist. You can find this on CNN and look at the entire documentary about that case over here. Now, some states, you know, have laws that okay this. Massachusetts appeals court actually rules that convicted rapists have parental rights over babies that are born from rape. It's out of control, and again, this is a global agenda. In the Netherlands, right here, we are passing a 50-50 mandatory custody law, meaning that fathers automatically get full custody of children after birth. Imagine getting raped or getting pregnant from a one-night stand and not wanting to have an abortion. The mother is now forced to co-parent with such a man for the rest of her life. Mind you that pro bono legal aid is about to get abolished in the Netherlands. So this will have serious consequences for the next generation. And the really horrific part of all of this is that no one in Dutch Parliament is protesting any of this. So we got a real problem here, and this is happening all over the world. And again, it's a real issue. In the UK, free legal aid has already been abolished, and results about the mommicide pandemic in the UK have just been released in a new report called Suffer the Little Children and Their Mothers, a dossier on the unjust separation of children from their mothers by Anne Neal and Nina Lopez. It's a wonderful 81-page research project exactly on this topic. So this is part of the problem that needs serious consideration. So let's look at these numbers of these kids who are molested. I mean, my goodness, 70 million children. This is just the United States, right? Will be sexually abused over the next 18 years. Wow. And 47% of child molesters were sexually abused as children themselves, right? I mean, these numbers are insane. And let's look at this. 1% of child molesters are female, right? 400,000 convicted pedophiles live in the US, and only 1 in 10 children will tell someone they were molested. I mean, this is an absolute pandemic that's going on. And these fathers' rights groups promoting themselves as pro-parent groups, that there are a bunch of pro-parent, pro-50-50 groups that are just fathers' rights groups in disguise, basically. So they are pushing to get these 50-50 mandatory laws passed? Why do children need shared parenting, right? So they push for this shared parenting, and that's exactly what we don't want. We cannot co-parent with a terrorist. We cannot co-parent with pedophiles. Okay, so when you see this, the law looks real benign, but it actually has serious consequences. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to this issue with a 50-50 type of forced co-parenting. So let's go back to the protective mothers, right? We're still in that step 4, and we've already concluded that protective mothers who have lost their children to abusive fathers are financially destroyed trying to litigate their cases. Most end up selling their homes, if they had one. The attorneys they hire will just lead them on and until they're siphoned from their last penny. I'm actually looking at one of those cases this week where a mother was completely railroaded by her own attorney. I mean, this is nothing but organized crime. Okay, these attorneys all know each other. They have, drinks with opposing party at the bar, and they concoct these situations and these outcomes on the golf court. It's another article, actually not sharing today, but I actually have an article about that. So let's face it, when the mothers are penniless, they are now forced to litigate in court in what's called pro se status, meaning that they don't have an attorney. Okay, they don't know much about the law. Most mothers are not law students or necessarily have ever had anything to do with it, so they have to educate themselves on it, and they're up against the dirty tricks of these seasoned attorneys, right? And the one thing I want to mention is not all countries allow pro se litigation. For example, here in the Netherlands, you're forced to get a lawyer. So if you don't have any money, you don't have any rights. Now, you think that the nightmare would stop here, but no. You'd think it would stop, right? The fathers have the money, they have the kids, they've destroyed their ex-wife's home, career, finances, they have everything, but no, these guys will go on and on and on. We're dealing with sociopaths here. We're dealing with individuals that are, I don't know, possessed with some demonic energy. I mean, their ultimate aim is for their victims to die. I don't see it any other way. And this leads us to step 5, where the domestic terrorism continues. These guys will stalk, slander, and defame their ex-wives to their employers, to family, to friends. I'll try to make this picture a little bigger. Here we have Christian Norgaard emailing his ex-wife Tammy, who's fighting to get her kids back. Tammy, Mia, which is the daughter, Mia cannot speak with Sarah until she's back. If I find you first, I will kill you, and you know what I will do to Mia. You know that I can do to Sarah, you know what I can do to Sarah alone if you push me. I mean, these are domestic terrorists even threatening to kill their own children. I've seen guys plant listening devices in the backpacks of their kids to, listen to what the mothers are saying to the children at home. I've seen guys who get protective orders against the mothers simply because the mothers would send a text, to their children to say, I love you. One such interviews I've done here is with Melissa Barnett. She had yellow roses delivered to her daughter for her 15th birthday. And she was arrested. She's facing 5 years in jail for delivering yellow roses to her daughter for her birthday. We got the interview I did with Mara Waston, who texted, "I love you," to her son at 18 years old as he graduated high school, and she ended up in jail for that. I mean, this is completely out of control. And we need to expose that, right? That's one of the reasons why I have the show. Now, some of these fathers, and most of them, will go and create false fake Facebook accounts, false websites, and emails, and they will actually target the mothers on Facebook. Like, for example, this picture that I posted on Facebook. My ex then contacts Facebook and have this removed. Now, you know, this is not posing any danger to my daughter. My daughter is 13 years old. In this picture, she is like 4 or 5 years old. She doesn't look anything like this anymore. So there's no reason to remove this loving picture of a mother and child. You know, they're out of control, and they don't stop there. These guys will actually slander these moms to their employers, and you know, protective mothers lose their jobs as a result of this. They lose their jobs as a result of the legal abuse, and many end up homeless. And when they cannot pay the court-ordered child support and the attorney's fees and the guardian ad litem's fees and all these fees, sometimes they're even forced to go to jail over this. And I started a database on the mothers who have been placed in jail for such nonsense. Here on my website, under reflection, you can go to the jailed button, and it'll take you to a list of moms who have spent time in jail trying to protect their kids, trying to fight for their kids. And these are all clickable links that will take you to petitions and YouTube videos and websites of these moms, newspaper articles about these moms getting incarcerated. There are protective mothers who cannot always endure the total devastation of their lives. You know, not only have they lost their kids, but they've also lost their homes, their careers, their finances, and they also get stigmatized by society and often even by their own family and friends. Because, you know, the myth is that mothers always get custody, and it's just that, it's a myth. When mothers lose custody of their children, the general consensus is that, oh, she must have done something wrong, or, you know, there's something wrong with her. This is nothing new. For many centuries, women have been labeled as crazy or hysterical, right? That's been going on for many, many centuries, and I have an interesting little video about that, and I hope it plays because it's on Facebook. Let's try.
Hysteria, meaning of the uterus, is a medical sounding word assigned to women who cause trouble. The concept of hysteria goes back to the myths of ancient Greece, in which a group of Argonaut virgins refused to honour the phallus and fled to the mountains. This behaviour was interpreted as madness and was cured by forcing the women to join carnally with young and strong men. By the 5th century BC, Hippocrates was using the word hysteria to describe women experiencing anxiety or stress. And by the Middle Ages, hysteria was associated with original sin and witchcraft. Exorcism and torture became the preferred treatments, and they remained so into the modern age. The most famous outbreak of hysteria was the Salem witch trials, at which 19 women were hanged for witchcraft. Throughout history, hysteria has almost exclusively been regarded as a women's disorder, linked to either too much or not enough interest in men, and failure to fulfill a woman's societal role. Psychiatrist Judith Herman even argues that historically observed symptoms of hysteria were actually instances of PTSD associated with psychological, physical, and sexual violence against women. So when female identifying persons are called hysterical, that's actually a message that we need to get back in our place, that we need to stop participating in men's business, which is exactly the sort of attitude that gets my uterus in a twist.
Now, what's really concerning is because the women are made out to be, you know, crazy and dangerous and ostracized by society, you know, there are mothers that can't handle this. Not only do mothers get murdered by their abusive ex-husbands or ex-partners, they also end up committing suicide. And I've started creating a database of the mothers who've lost their lives to these types of family court dramas. Here in the fatalities list, under, if you click on reflection, you can find it over here. And again, this list, I mean, it's an endless list of mothers and children who have died as a result of family court. And you can click on all these links, and again, they'll bring you up to stories that are public, and they're endless. Children also commit suicide because of this. The amount of mothers that get murdered, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But the real drama in my fatalities list is the amount of children who are murdered once they're in the full custody of their fathers. I mean, this is just by alphabet. It's a scroll-a-thon. And again, you know, these aren't just names. You can click on all of these and it'll take you to newspaper articles and other databases where these kids are listed. And I mean, I can just scroll here for, you know, a couple of minutes to get to X, Y, and Z. You know, we really need to take a look at this. Yeah, maternal deprivation is what we call it. It is a human rights issue. Here's a website where you can read all about maternal deprivation and how it goes down. There's Doreen Ludwig, who wrote a book on motherless America. I mean, that's where we're headed. And again, this is a global situation, but yeah, very, very serious. Now, for the children that do survive, they are often placed in what's called forced trauma bonding therapy. Well, that's not what it's called, but that's what I'm calling it. Deprogramming treatment. So, you know, once these fathers have full custody of the kids, they put their children in deprogramming treatment because they have to learn to reject their mothers. You know, they have to they have to somehow make to believe that their mothers are crazy or dangerous, which is extremely harmful for the children. And many of these kids develop Stockholm syndrome, where they end up bonding with the perpetrator, which in this case is the father. I mean, these are downright hostage situations, right? And these fathers will try and bribe the kids with expensive clothes and toys and trips in an attempt to not only silence the child in submission, but to teach that child to hate the mother as well. And the children often develop dissociative identity disorder, and by the time that they reach adolescence, they frequently act out with promiscuous behavior. And that would be considered, obviously, what's called an adverse childhood experience, which is something that the Department of Justice is starting to look at and is starting to get integrated into the educational system to teach teachers how to recognize children with adverse childhood experiences. So there's that is on itself a good thing, but we need to really drive home that maternal deprivation is an adverse childhood experience, to put it mildly, and that these children are in severe danger. After all, some children will continue to resist, obviously. And they don't want to live with their fathers, and they will pretend that they're okay, but inside this is really tearing them up. And sometimes these children will be very vocal, for example, in court. Now, I have here another video on Facebook of Judge Gorsica, who actually, and I'll try and have it load, which will be difficult again, but this is definitely something, a must-see, of Judge Gorsica, who sends 3 siblings, aged 9, 10, and 13, to detention for refusing to have lunch with their abusive father. And we'll try and play it. Let's see if it works.
It's ridiculous, I have to say. I've never seen anything like this. One day you can watch this video and realize that you two have been brainwashed. Your dad is a good man. Your dad is a good man who loves you. You have been brainwashed. You are brainwashed. This is not normal behavior. No adult in this courtroom, except one, thinks this is normal. Every single adult in this courtroom thinks you have been brainwashed. Your dad is a good man. Wipe that smirk off your face, Romy. I don't know what that is. I've never seen anything like it. You're a defiant, contemptuous young man. The court finds both of you in direct contempt. You both are going to live in Children's Village. Your mother is not allowed to visit. No one on your mom's side is allowed to visit. Only your father and therapist and Mr. Lancet. When you are ready to have lunch with your dad, to have dinner with your dad, to be normal human beings, I will review this when your dad tells me you're ready. Otherwise, you are living in Children's Village till you graduate from high school. That's the order of the court.
There's another judge. There's a lot of judges are doing this. Here's another judge that you can watch. Mom claims judge bullied her child. The judge will basically tell the child the following: if you don't go and live with your father, you will have to go to Child Haven. Now, Child Haven is similar to SOS Children's Village. These are detention camps for children who are resisting, living with their abusive fathers. And I'll show you. These are the types of things that I come across in the parents' Facebook groups, right? John Taylor Gell left Leani in juvenile jail known as Children's Village with a vomit bowl full of insects due to her stomach condition. What was her bed? There was no bed. What was her crime? There was no crime. Were these conditions safe? No. Judge Gorsica even said to the kids, do you want to have to go to the bathroom in front of other people until you are 18 years old? Interestingly enough, the children still chose Children's Village over being with the abusive father, which tells you how terrible their experience with the fathers really is to make a decision like that, right? So there's serious issues with this forced reunification therapy. Here's more on this particular case, the Simone children who were forced into that SOS Children's Village because they didn't want to have lunch with their fathers. It's extremely hard for these children to understand how adults, judges, attorneys, and child protective services are encouraging child abuse inflicted by their own fathers, right? Maternal deprivation by itself is one of the worst forms of child abuse, on par with sexual abuse, okay? And the effects of the abuse actually lead to different brain developments. This childhood trauma leads to brains wired for fear. And of course, this is awful. We want to stop this. And one of the things we need to do, what I've tried to do is, get some message out there to the kids as to why the adults are doing this, why the judges and the attorneys and child protective services and law enforcement is not protecting them. So on my website, I've created a page called Message for the Stolen Kids. This explains in children's language what I am explaining to the viewers right now. And it includes why the fathers are doing this and what they can do to stay safe and to get other adults involved who can help them, because we need to get these kids empowered to speak up somehow, which is very difficult, because if they say something to a teacher, that teacher might start talking to their father, and the father might appear very charming, and there might be serious consequences for them disclosing the issues. So it's difficult for them. Let's look at some of the kids who have gone onto YouTube and started talking about their own cases on YouTube, because we really want to hear from them what it's like. So, Biggie, if you can play clip 7, 8, and 9, please.
You can make me live at my father's house, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be home. There's a difference between a house and a home. And my home is at my mom's. I know that you don't care, but I do.
I'm Sydney Wolferts, and this is my sister, Danny Wolferts, and we have something important to say. Well, first of all, we're not missing or lost. We're very safe, but we ran away because no one was listening to us, and we aren't coming back until we can live with our mom again. Well, I'm 15 and a half, and you're almost 14. And people keep telling us we should talk to a judge to tell them what we want and why. But we're not allowed to talk to a judge, and instead of a judge listening to us, we were just ordered back to Kansas. And the reason why we were taken from our mom in the first place is because of a really big lie. And it's so weird that we were taken because of that lie after living with our mom our whole life. Our mom hasn't ever made us or tried to make us hate our dad, but some people keep trying to make us believe that. And it's actually the exact opposite. Our dad has so much hate for our mom, and he's got other people to hate her too. He can get what he wants, and we care about him, but the lies that are being told and the hatred for our mom is hard to be around. Mom is positive and kind. And some attorney people who don't know us must think they do because they made us live with our dad. I mean, we are supposed to have the right to be safe. So we're refusing to go back. And if anyone tries to make us, we will just keep running away until we can be safe again. And the people fighting against what's good for us are making this whole problem happen, and we just want them to stop. We're just tired of not being heard. And we're pleading for them to just leave us alone. And if we have to keep running away, and something bad happens because of it, it will be their fault. And we just hope that someone is listening.
Let me tell you a story. A child is being sexually abused by an otherwise upstanding middle-class man. This child tells someone about it, and it gets sent to the police department. The police then do a lousy investigation, dismiss it, and let the child molester go free. Many others are told about this, but none protect the child. Now, who is this story about? Is it about Sandusky's victim? Is it about one of the tens of thousands of other kids that this happens to every year? Or is it about me? I'm Damon Moulter, and when I reported that my father, Eric Moulter, was sexually abusing me, the police did a terrible investigation. Then, the San Diego family courts swept it under the rug and made me live with him. Later, when the San Diego district attorney was investigating, they wouldn't let me talk to them, and they wouldn't get any evidence. After watching the Sandusky trial, I'm afraid that my father is going to rape other children, and I can't let that happen, so I made an evidentiary abuse affidavit. Since I was first abused in Salinas, I sent my evidentiary abuse affidavit to District Attorney Dean Flippo of Monterey County and asked him to do a thorough investigation and press charges against my father. You can view my evidentiary abuse affidavit at Safe Kids International's Facebook page or website. If the Sandusky trial has taught us one thing, it's that it's the duty of citizens to report suspected abuse. Please, call or email Dean Flippo and report that I might have been abused. Every call will make him treat this more seriously. Thank you for making this world a better place, for getting a child molester off the streets, and for showing predators everywhere that they will be stopped.
Okay, and then I have another clip here on my Free Jasmine from Court Ordered Abduction Facebook page.
Hi, I'm Cassidy Chaikin. And I'm Mackenzie Chaikin. And on March 2nd, 2012, we were wrongfully removed from our mom, Allison Chaikin, by CPS, and it's been 2 years that they've put us with our abuser, Kyle Chaikin, our father, and his girlfriend, Karen Pinto, and since we've been on our dad's, like, a lot of bad things have happened to us, and nobody believes us, so, like, just making this video is our last resort. And, it all started when Lauren Kugler and Ellen Schmer went to CPS and said really bad things about our mom that weren't true, and, Barbara Burkhardt, a family psychologist, she went to the court and lied about our mom, too, and then we got taken away, and she only met our mom 2 times before deciding that my mom is psycho. Yeah, and then Linda Gottlieb, another therapist, she started to, like, she was supposed to see my mom, and she was supposed to see us with our dad, and she refused to see us with our mom, and then she continued to talk about our mom in our sessions with our dad. Which isn't allowed. And, like, we've tried to tell a lot of people, like, about what has happened. We've told Kevin Gersh and Kim Ott from West Hills Day Camp, and they just said that we're spoiled brats. We've told, like, a lot of people from Signal Hill Elementary School, our old school, like Deborah Strowski, Eileen Gregory, and Miss Ungerzad, a therapist, and they knew our entire situation, and they didn't care. They just let it go that we were taken away from our mom. Eileen Gregory actually kept me in one time when I was in 5th grade. I had a recess, and she kept me in trying to get me to tell her things, like trying to convince me like that my mom is psycho, and to tell her things about how my mom is crazy. And that's the day that I realized that something happened where my dad talked to her, because she wouldn't just make me admit that my mom's psycho, because she's not. And we've told people from West Hollow Middle School, where we go now, Ed Marinich, Mr. Hamburger, Kelly Fallon, the superintendent, Julia Gallo, the social worker for the district, and they really haven't helped us at all. And they called CPS, and Lori Towns from CPS and a couple of detectives came to talk to us, and she told us that what our dad is doing to us is perfectly fine. And my dad, he's physically hurt my sister. He's hit her, punched her, put socks in her mouth. He's choked her. He's done everything you could ever imagine. And he says things to us that just mentally, it stays with you.
Losers don't have friends.
Slut, whore.
Your butt is jiggly.
Yeah, he'll grab my butt and comment on my boobs, and he'll say that because I'm short like his girlfriend, I'll be really good in bed when I'm older. And it's just things that stick with you. And in the past 2 months, I've been to Stony Brook, by the mental place, CPEP or something like that,
CPEP
2 times, because my dad, there are just times where I really can't handle it, and he makes me feel like it would just be easier if I wasn't here, and it's just really difficult. And we've tried to go to so many people for help, and nobody's willing to help us because they don't want to take the fall for it.
Here's 2 other children in the full custody of their abusive father, literally begging someone to find their video to help them. And they said, we looked a judge up online, and we know that he's done this to hundreds of families by taking away the children from their mom, and he did this to us too. We've talked to everyone and beyond that you can imagine, and each time they told us lie after lie, and it keeps getting worse. We can't do this anymore. We just need somebody to help us get home because it's not safe for us to be with our dad. Wow, that's pretty damn desperate. And, we need to realize that child abuse, that, maternal deprivation is a severe form of child abuse. And experts are speaking on this topic. There was one particular task force that started looking into this. And it's a task force, a public hearing here on January 9th of last year, where Dr. Miller actually talks about this, and some other experts as well, where they say, look, these types of fathers that do this have severe personality disorders, and this is grounds for reversal of custody and immediate custody. There is no reunification type of therapy possible. It's damage to the child. All that needs to happen here is for these evaluators and psychologists to be properly trained to see that when a father deprives a child of their mother, they're mentally ill, and the judge needs to yank custody from them.
And one of the things to look at is the degree of psychopathology. The people who claim PA is not a syndrome will usually say we don't want to pathologize it. But the severe cases are fundamentally different than moderate cases. In a moderate case, it is very reasonable to try to educate the parent to be more cooperative. But in a severe case, where you have what one expert called an obsessed alienator, that person with almost 100% certainty has a severe personality disorder. Normal people just don't do that to their children. And one clue would be that they block access for years on end for trivial, frivolous reasons that you would never block access to your children for. Another indication or indicator would be the repeated breaching of court orders, which again a normal person would never do. So just to give you a glimpse of the pattern, when you see excuses like they don't like him, they don't want to see him, and I'm not going to force them, you should sit bolt upright in your chair. And when that's the investigation part proves that to be the case, and then the targeted parent has not seen the children for years on end, if not months. And then there's repeated violations of clear-cut court orders. You know, Mr. Jones, if you do this again, and he keeps doing it. Those folks are delusional. The type of personality disorder that they have, I know at least one or two of you, I think it's two of you are clinical psychologists. I have never seen such a severe case where there wasn't what we would call a cluster B disorder, which includes 4 different things.
On page 719, it defines this dysfunctional family dynamic as psychological abuse of a child. And therefore, I submit that we need to treat these cases of alienation, whether mild, severe, or moderate, as a form of emotional abuse subject to CPS investigation. And if it's determined that the obsessive alienator is incorrigible, we need to treat it like any other case of child abuse. That's removal from the alienating parent because they are abusing the child.
You know, these children endure absolute terror at the hands of their abusive fathers, just of the fact that they've been maternally deprived by itself. And again, suicides are not uncommon. And again, I've listed this here on the fatalities page. The children who are committing suicide, there's one particular story here of Jack. He committed suicide at age 29. And this is the only case that I have found where the father admitted after his son killed himself that the suicide occurred because he had maternally deprived his son from his mother. And, you know, Jack, you know, let everybody know that that's the reason why he ended his life. And the father regretted doing that to the mother of Jack and to Jack, which is wonderful. I mean, I really wish more fathers would look at that. You don't want this to happen to your own child, right? I mean, it's nothing I can imagine. Now, for the children who have survived and who are now adults, that have organized themselves in a group that's called Courageous Kids. And, you know, they sure are. The CourageousKids.net, Courageous Kids Network, put a website together, and these children, they not only have a help page here for the children who are still being held hostage and are continuing to get abuse, which is very helpful. But they also go and speak to public audiences about what has happened to them. And Biggie, can you load clip 12 so we can share with the audience what one of those conferences looks like where they're sharing their experience?
And these are the people that are going to be the trailblazers and make a difference in the future, because they're going to tell the story firsthand. You know, as the director of the Office of Victim Services, it's very strange. In the last year, I've gotten so many calls from mostly mothers, again, that are in situations in domestic violence court where they're in custody issues with the father of the kids, and the kids are being put in the home and given, the fathers are given custody of these children, and they are abusers. And it's so frustrating for me to see that the judges and the system are not getting it. They don't get it. And there's something that needs to be done. Talk about, you know, you have these kids that are being abused and put back in the home for custody with these dads, and it's just amazing. Anyway, now the real part of this presentation is the people that we're here to honor, the young adults that are going to give you a brief victim impact statement.
Okay, whatever works. I'm flexible. Okay, my name is Randall Kravitz, and here's my statement here. When I was 11 years old, the family court took me and my brother away from our mom in California, away from our 4-H and from our friends for absolutely basic no reason at all. Just picked us up, threw us out like the trash to our dad in Indiana. And we were forced to live with him. And about 2 years later, I got tired of it. I got tired of not being heard, and I decided to run away because I felt that was my only option to actually be, heard. And I knew I couldn't go back to my mom because they would probably throw her in jail or try to do something really bad to her. So for 2 years, I just hung around from friend's house to friend's house, trying to avoid from being caught and thrown back with my dad because I didn't want to be there. And then finally I met this excellent advocate, and I finally got hooked up with a good attorney. No offense to all you attorneys out there, but the good ones are very limited nowadays. Alright, then finally, my voice was actually heard via my attorney, which was the greatest thing in the world, and I was able to finally live with my mom and be normal, go outside, go back to school, and not live like a refugee. And just being out here speaking like this helps me get through, and hopefully we'll stop it.
I don't think I can follow that one up very well, so I'm just going to read mine straight. My name is Fatima Walliger. I'm almost 15. My story is when I was taken away from my mom, and when I was really, really little, and I was put into custody of my abusive dad in Tehama County. I was not allowed to see, talk, any contact from her for several years. I didn't know what I did. One of the hardest things for me was I didn't know what I had done to make my mom not love me anymore. I felt really alone and just really, really stranded. I was by myself, and I just couldn't cope with the feeling. When I got old enough, I started fighting back the only way I could, which was by running away constantly. I was put into foster care, taken back out, running away, and that's the only way I could deal with it. The worst part for me was being handcuffed and taken to the psych ward because I was pleading to go home. I was like, please, let me go home, and they decided they didn't want to. I'm finally able to be with my mom, and I'm having a normal life, which is really helping me, heal those hard wounds. The reason I want to speak out is because there's a lot of kids I know that, go through the same issue but aren't ready to speak out yet, and they need encouragement, so that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I have been caught in the family court litigation ever since I can remember. I was taken away from my safe mother and put in the custody of my father, who physically abused me and touched me in ways a father shouldn't touch a daughter. I wasn't able to see my mother for several years. I began running away from my father when I was 12 to get away from the abuse. The worst part for me was being afraid of my father's violence and not having my mom to protect and comfort me. Speaking out has helped me to get protection from my school principal and counselor. Hello, my name's Stephanie, and I watched my father beat my sister until her face was bloody, her head black and blue, and her lips split open. The abuse didn't seem to matter to the family court. My siblings and I were taken away from my mother and put in the custody of my father, of our abusive father. My older siblings and I fought to get free of our father. We are now safe for now, and our younger siblings aren't. The worst part for me is not having any peace in my life, and the thing that has helped me heal the most is being involved with live theater, and I'm speaking out because I hope to help and change things.
Hello, my name
name is Jeff Hoverson, and when my younger sisters disclosed being molested by my father, we were taken away from our protective mother and put in the custody of our abusive father. We lived like prisoners and were isolated from our mom, our brothers, our grandparents, and all the friends we knew. Hopelessness and living in constant fear of my dad eventually caused me to become so depressed that I couldn't sleep at night, and I had lost the will to live. And no one in the court system would help me at all. So I finally escaped on my own and went back to my mom's house. But the worst part for me was being at my dad's, not being able to sleep at night, not knowing what he was going to do next, and having no one to comfort me. But being in a comedy acting program has helped me gain back some self-esteem and also helped me to heal. And now I'm speaking out because my sisters are still trapped at my dad's house, and hoping to get them free. So if you've been moved by any of our stories, even in the slightest little bit, please write a letter to Governor Schwarzenegger asking him to fix this problem. Thank you.
It's so important to hear the children share these stories themselves, and they go to demonstrations where, there's a bunch of them that actually tried to escape. They fled the United States to get safe. Let's look at a trailer called No Way Out But One. It's a documentary produced to show exactly this particular issue where mothers take their children and flee the United States to get to safety. Biggie, can you play clip number 13?
The day we walked into court, my lawyer said, this doesn't look good, this doesn't look good. And I said, no, it's got to be okay. We're telling the truth.
It's very much like an Alice in Wonderland tale. The way I describe it is that if someone were to intentionally go out and design a family court system likely to protect the smallest number of victims, it would look just like our family court system.
How do you negotiate with somebody that's either battering you, your children, physically, sexually abusing your children? What do you offer? Every other weekend?
In every single case involving allegations of abuse that I've been involved in, the father always alleges that the mother is trying to alienate them from the child.
Why didn't people believe the drawings that the children were making?
I was told on several occasions that I wasn't allowed to talk about what my father was doing to us.
I thought if you were a good person, if you went to church, if you were a good mom, if you took care of your kids, if you told the truth, that it would be okay. I mean, even to the very end.
Dateline Minneapolis. 3 days before Christmas, Hennepin County District Judge Michael Davis told Holly Ann Collins he was taking away her 2 children and giving sole custody to her ex-husband.
I opened the shower curtain, and written on the wall in big red crayon was "Help me." I can't leave them there anymore. He will kill them.
I knew I was going to miss the States. I knew that we had to leave.
They asked for a passport. They said, you have to be returned to your country. I was arrested and I was put into a jail cell.
Well, it is illegal to violate a court order and take your children and run. And I have never advised a client to do that, and I would never advise a client to do that. That said, I think there are laws higher than the laws that get handed down by judges.
Okay, So we've seen this particular case where the mom actually took the kids to the Netherlands and was granted a sanctuary, safe sanctuary for her and the kids. But for those protective mothers who are watching this right now, please realize that the Netherlands has changed its policy, and if you try that, you will get deported with your children immediately. So that is a story that was possible maybe 10, 15 years ago, but not any longer. And I'll explain to you how abusive fathers sever the mother-child bond in these international cases. Let's say we have an international couple, right? A mother and a father from different nationalities. What the abusive fathers will do is they will use what's called the Hague Convention Treaty to set the mothers up. So first, the abusive father allows the mother and their children to depart to the country of origin of the mother. And once the moms and the kids arrive, the abusive fathers accuse the mother of parental abduction and take the case to court according to the Hague Convention on the civil aspects of international child abduction. And I'll share my screen here so you can see what that looks like. Now, the Hague Convention promptly deports all children back to the father's country because the treaty mandates that this is where any custody disputes must be resolved. The Hague Convention does not look at domestic violence and child abuse when deporting children back, which they actually should, according to Article 13b in that treaty. So let's scroll here to Article 13 and read Article 13b together. It states, if there is a grave risk that his or her return would expose the child to physical or psychological harm or otherwise place the child in an intolerable situation, then the child is not ordered returned. The judicial or administrative authority may also refuse to order the return of the child if it finds that the child objects to being returned and has attained an age and degree of maturity at which it is appropriate to take account of its views. 85% of countries around the world have ratified this treaty, but many of these countries do not apply Article 13 of the treaty in these cases. And countries that are not in the treaty are usually countries that are unsafe and impossible to get into. I mean, really, there is no place to run if you think of trying to get away. I'm sorry to say that, but that is the truth. They have set up this matrix network that is ironclad proof. And my own case is an international case like that, again, where my ex allowed me to go to the Netherlands from the United States. And then when my daughter disclosed abuse and molestation to CPS while we were in the Netherlands, he started one of those Hague cases and she was deported. There are thousands of cases like mine, you know, moms that I met, and I've got a couple of them listed here on my website under Hague cases. And again, these are cases where I've listed the names of the moms that are public, and you can click on these links and it'll take you to newspaper articles or actual court cases of these moms, and some of them I've interviewed on the show as well. Global Arc is an organization that is collecting data on such cases, and they're trying to warn mothers about these situations. Like, hey, if you plan to have a child in another country, you need to realize that you're going to probably be stuck in that country because you can't come back. The Hague Convention will immediately deport you and your children back. And if you decide not to go, then, you know, your children are still forced to go back. Their research shows that only 1% of protective mothers is actually allowed to go back to their country of origin. And as such, the Hague Convention really is nothing more than an international fathers' rights deportation treaty. The child then gets deported, right, once the Hague Convention rules that the child needs to go back. And often this occurs with brute force, like in the case, in my own case, my daughter was deported by an armed SWAT team. And I was detained without charges and not allowed to talk to my attorney, which is all completely unlawful because I should have had summary proceedings to stop the deportation. And the district attorney simply admitted that they didn't do that to, traffic my daughter out of the country. They're real blatant about it. So at this point, what happens once the child is deported like this, the mother is then suddenly made out to be a child abductor, even though the father allowed the mother and the child to go on this trip. And she cannot cross the border anymore. She'll get arrested upon crossing the border when she attempts to follow the children. And when that happens, the mothers usually face around 9 years of jail time. One such moms here is Sarah Nixon. She is currently still in jail. She is shuffled around by the FBI from one prison to the next, so we have a hard time keeping track of her. It's just awful. And she didn't do anything. She just followed her child. So for protective mothers who do not cross the border to follow their kids because they can't, and for those moms who deal with American abusive fathers, they must now battle that 5-step American judicial nightmare that I just explained from across the border, which has proven to be incredibly difficult. But then there are also cases in which mothers actually won Hague Convention trials, but American judges overruled it anyway. And there are cases where mothers won Hague Convention trials, but fathers were still allowed to abduct the children to other countries anyway. So really, we can only conclude from all these findings that fathers, paternal fascism is rife, all right? The Hague Convention is nothing more than a fathers' rights deportation treaty. This all originated in the United States, and this fathers' rights agenda has metastasized globally at pandemic rates. And I want the audience to realize that the United States has not signed on to the UN Treaty on the Rights of the Child. And it is one of the only countries in the world that hasn't signed on to it. I mean, this article is from 2015, and at this point, Somalia had not signed on yet, but even Somalia has signed on to it. That said, countries that have signed on are not adhering to the treaty. So what good is a beautiful treaty on paper when in reality these treaties are not adhered to? Let's call it for what it is. It is a sham and it is a scam. And the impact on this generation of children and subsequently all generations to come is huge. Now, mothers worldwide are uniting to fight for the rights to raise and protect our children. Yes, that's what it's come to. And we call ourselves protective mama warriors. Some mothers state, some activists state that the problem that we face is only patriarchy and paternal fascism. Look, that's only part of it. First off, patriarchy is not a gender issue. After all, many female attorneys, judges, and court personnel actively help domestic terrorist fathers achieve their aims. There is definitely the issue of paternal entitlement that female court and CPS personnel cater to in order to get a leg up in the men's world. But there's also the problem of corruption. As I already discussed, the family court and CPS perpetrators make billions of dollars a year from this federally funded pro-abuse agenda. Don't think that this agenda is secretive. By no means. Attorneys who blow the whistle on this actually, get jailed for exposing this racketeering scheme.
What happens when you lose a democracy?
Richard Fine is an accomplished attorney who holds a PhD in international law and was an antitrust attorney with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. He is sounding the clarion call from his cell in the Los Angeles County Central Men's Jail, where he is being held without trial, without bail, without an attorney, and with every appeal denied.
Oh, there's absolutely no question that I'm a political prisoner. I mean, none whatsoever, because the political circumstance that has created this situation is that you have a straight, out-and-out abuse of power that is taking place here, and I am the person that went in and called them on it. This is a pure political thing. This is actually the biggest judicial scandal and judicial bribery scheme in American history.
He warns us from his personal experience that this could happen to you.
My being in jail for 1 year, and possibly longer, should show you that nobody is immune from this abuse of power.
Our forefathers warned us about this peril in the Declaration of Independence.
If you go back into a very interesting thing and read the end part of the Declaration of Independence, they talk about the judges being bought out by the king. And America in the beginning didn't have any judicial system because it was all being run by the king. And that's one of the reasons why we rebelled.
His situation is a foreshadowing that America is sliding into the despotism of a banana republic.
What is happening here in the United States right now, with my sitting in this jail, in this orange outfit, means that the government that is taking place here with the loss of our judiciary, and that's what it is the same thing that is happening in Iran, when they're throwing people in jail for protesting about an election. It's the same thing that is happening in Myanmar.
There are so many women lawyers at this demonstration today. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, we look like moms. We are, you've heard the expression disgruntled litigant. We are disgruntled lawyers. And we know we do our cases really well. We go in, we do what should happen, and what should happen doesn't happen. Children are being taken away, given to abusers, particularly those with money. And no matter what we do in the courtroom, why are we here on the street? We're here on the street because we are not being heard in the courtroom, no matter what we do. I went to Stanford. I've practiced 44 years. I'm one of the 3 people in California who's certified as both an appellate and a family law specialist. Think I can get listened to? No. If I can't make this system work, it can't be made to work. That's why we're here.
The attorneys that do stay on actually celebrate their human rights violation, their revenue machine. Biggie, play clip 15 and let's check out these attorneys and lawyers singing "Take Me to the Bank Tonight" during their Christmas luncheon.
life.
I mean, this is Christmas at all times, a time when protective mothers often feel suicidal because they cannot celebrate Christmas with their kids. It's outrageous, you know. So this issue goes even further than paternal fascism and corruption. How about moral and sexual corruption? You know, pedophilia is exploding. Sexual predators who have full custody of our kids. Where do you think all the child pornography is coming from? And don't think that the government is going to stop it. After all, they are watching that child pornography as we speak. Biggie, play clip 16.
Keeping them honest tonight, potentially hundreds of military employees and contractors who may have bought child pornography online but haven't been prosecuted or even in some cases investigated. That's right, you heard me, child pornography. As many as 1,700 names, according to a U.S. Senator, on a list of 5,200 from an internet sting operation overlooked the first time around 4 years ago. Only now are they supposedly getting a second look, and only after pressure from investigative reporters and the U.S. Senator you're about to hear from, Republican Charles Grassley. The Pentagon porn story began in 2006. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement child pornography sting operation called Project Flicker produced payment records of about 5,200 people, many of whom provided Army or fleet zip codes or military email addresses. Subsequently, the Pentagon's investigative branch, DCIS, began going through the ICE list to identify who actually was a DoD employee or a contractor. The investigation, however, only ran for 8 months and only cross-checked some 3,500 names for Pentagon ties, according to a senator. According to DCIS documents revealed in a Freedom of Information Act request, out of that 3,500, investigators uncovered 264 employees or contractors, including staffers for the Secretary of Defense and contractors at the NSA. 9 people had top security clearances, but only about 20% of those 264 people were completely investigated. Fewer still were prosecuted, and after about 8 months, the entire probe was halted. It left about 1,700 names totally unchecked, 1,700 alleged kiddie porn customers, an unknown number of whom may still work in some capacity for the Defense Department. Late last summer, after investigations by the Boston Globe and Yahoo News revealed the figures, a Pentagon spokesman promised to reopen the investigation, conceding that DCIS had stopped due to lack of resources. DCIS says it is now revisiting all 5,200 names, telling Senator Grassley's staff they've now identified 302 employees or staffers. The Pentagon's IG telling us, and I quote, "Any suggestion that the DoD Office of Inspector General or its criminal investigative arm, the DCIS, is not taking Operation Flicker and the issue of child pornography seriously is in error." But Senator Grassley says he is still not getting the cooperation he needs from...
Even the FBI admits they cannot tackle this issue because pedophilia goes all the way up into the White House. Shit floats to the top. Let's look at FBI Director Ted Gunderson disclosing what's going on. Biggie, play clip 17, please.
From the McDonald case, the next case I worked of a major consequence was the McMartin preschool case in Manhattan Beach, California. The children there claimed there were tunnels under the school. They were taken into the tunnels and through the tunnels up into the trap door of a bathroom in a triplex next door, placed in automobiles and prostituted in the community. These are 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old children before they entered kindergarten. In addition, the children claimed that they were flown into the mountains where they were involved with adults in robes, black robes, chanting, candles. They talked about the brown babies who were cut up, actually sacrificed. And in checking into this and researching this, of course, this was obviously a satanic ceremony.
Because I established, with the help of people like John DeCamp, former state senator in Nebraska, that we have in this country today a covert military criminal enterprise, government enterprise, primarily by U.S. military intelligence, that is operating full throttle and everybody refuses to investigate it. In the Nebraska case, it's called the Frenken cover-up. This is the book here that John DeCamp wrote, by the way. It's all documented in there. And in that particular instance, they were taking children out of foster homes, orphanages, Boys Town, driving them from Omaha, Nebraska to Sioux City, Iowa, 184 miles away, placing them in private jets and flying them to Washington, D.C. for sex orgies with prominent people, including congressmen, senators, and certain people in the White House. It's well documented how he was used. He was part of the kidnapping crew and was used as a decoy and when he was 10, 11, 12 years old in parks, shopping malls, to attract the children over near where the adults were in a car waiting for them. They throw them in the back seat, chloroform them, and make off with them. Paul also told me that these children, many of them become sex slaves. Many of them are used as toys. The boys, they call the boys toys. I don't know what they call the girls. But these degenerate, sick people, the men are more interested in the little boys than they are the girls for some reason. But it's all well documented. Paul drew the inside living quarters of the White House. Now this information broke in about 1987. That's about right after I entered, just before I entered. This international child kidnapping ring, I later learned, was out of Washington, D.C. It was very active, and the organization is known as the Finders. And I have a report on the Finders back there. Everything I'm telling you is documented, by the way. The Finders has been established and operating throughout the 1960s up to the present time. It was exposed in 1987. They moved their operation to Wichita, Kansas, and they're operating right today in Wichita, Kansas. I have taken my report to the FBI a half a dozen times, demanded an investigation, and I have yet to be in. As I stand here and you sit there, the children are disappearing.
So FBI Director Ted Gunderson explains that some of these kids are used as intel honey traps to set a snare from which numerous members of Congress and high military and corporate officials can be blackmailed and controlled. You know, this is a good article that describes that from Veterans Today, how pedophile terrorism is running rampant in America and how these kids are used to, you know, set people up. Which is part of it, of course. It's not all of it. These folks at the top are involved in bizarre satanic rituals and murders of children. I mean, we got the Frenken cover-up documentary that Ted Gunderson mentions in that YouTube video. And in it, he also mentioned that the White House stopped this particular Frenken cover-up documentary from being aired through the Discovery Channel. However, thank God for the internet, we now have this documentary online, and you can find it on YouTube. It's called Conspiracy of Silence, the Frenken cover-up, and it shows you that the White House is involved in the trafficking of children since the 80s. And it's too long to play here, but now you know where to find it. Alex Jones from InfoWars has been reporting on this for many, many years. This is a particularly good clip that you can also find on YouTube. It's about the Bohemian Grove, where the elite comes together to perform bizarre rituals on children, satanic rituals, pedophile stuff, weird stuff. And we have the Pizzagate scandal, of course. And if you're not aware of what the Pizzagate scandal is, it is, you can see it as a delivery service of children, a pedophile delivery service. So you call into specific pizza places, and if you mention the word pizza, then you're referring to a girl. And if you're ordering a hot dog, you're ordering a boy. And chicken nuggets are babies. These pedophiles have an entirely coded language, and they have a culture of art, music, and restaurants and gatherings to rape these children. And if you think that it is a hoax, think again, because mainstream media is reporting these findings. As you can see here, this journalist is a groundbreaking mainstream media journalist, and he's being retaliated against because he reported on it. We all know at this point that pedophilia is an epidemic. This is a article from the Washington Examiner where, again, the FBI says there are epidemic levels of pedophilia and child trafficking. Well, they should really do something about it. And if you think that this is just happening, then think again. There is a clear United Nations pedophile agenda, and it's called Agenda 21. Biggie, please play clip 20 where we can hear these folks blatantly talking about it.
Make it last. And the answer to that is that you steal a generation of children and you indoctrinate them so that they accept these ideas and they become global citizens in the
The United Nations has a clear global pedophile agenda and pushes educational material in schools worldwide aimed at sexualizing children as young as 1 year old. Biggie, please play clip 21.
This is definitely an attack. It will affect your child rearing. It will affect your education system.
This is instructions for the teacher in the classroom to ask her or his students, how do people express their sexual feelings? What is abstinence? And here are some answers. Oral sex, masturbation, anal sex, massage, holding hands, touching each other's genitals, saying, I like you. And what they're doing is equating all these things. Saying I like you is equal to anal sex.
It is pornography. Men, especially on the House floor, did not want to look at. We couldn't show this on the television news, but yet we want our 4th grade children to be looking at this book.
In the name of sexuality education, children are seeing obscene materials that have been ruled by Congress and by the Supreme Court impossible to show to children.
An online CSE program for African youth called The World Starts With Me tells children that sexuality includes oral sex and masturbation. It then tells them it's their own choice if they want to lose their virginity. It shows children pictures of naked girls and boys in various stages of development, and then asks them to point out differences in their private parts. Parents likely will never know, as it is all done online away from home.
They have elementary students as young as 9 years old. Then they teach them how to wear a condom. And they have this plastic genitalia, and they even have young girls. They're teaching them how to put a condom on a male genitalia and boys how to put a condom on a woman genitalia without the knowledge and consent of the parents.
They're giving them handouts, negotiating sexual encounters with other students. For example, there are statements like this: can I take your shirt off? It makes me hot when you touch me here. Is it okay if I take my pants off?
Where we in Latin America, we still have a lot of poverty. We have communities that don't have fresh water, that don't have electricity. Focus is completely shifted from basic needs. They get comprehensive sexual education without the consent of parents, taking and deconstructing the family.
My brother Luigi and I had an opportunity to go to the United Nations and give a speech on the UN floor. I told them how Planned Parenthood was passing out a booklet for HIV positive youth at the United Nations called Healthy, Happy, and Hot. This is for the kids who have AIDS. It teaches about sexual pleasure through masturbation with same-sex partners and even if you are drunk.
This pamphlet called Healthy, Happy, and Hot tells young people that you have the right not to disclose your HIV status to a sexual partner if you're not comfortable. It also tells young people that are HIV positive that if they decide with their partner not to wear a condom, that's their decision.
The World Health Organization standards for sexuality education in Europe actually suggest that children ages 0 to 4 should be given information about masturbation and given the right to explore their gender identity. For ages 4 to 6, children should be taught about same-sex relationships and respect for different norms regarding sexuality.
The interests of organizations like UNFPA and IPPF is to get parents out of the picture and to radicalize and sexualize children.
UNFPA has tried to convince my country to change our positions on issues such as reproductive rights and comprehensive sexuality education. Madam Chair, does the UNFPA think it can do this because Nauru is the smallest member states of the United Nations?
The Nigerian government was actually told by the Western countries that if they do not give in, that they will be denied foreign aid.
On page 89 of a UNICEF-published Sexual and Reproductive Health Manual, UNICEF listed situations in which one can obtain sexual pleasure that included sexual responses directed towards inanimate objects, animals, minors, and non-consenting persons.
In the context of the Sustainable Development Goals that determines the agenda for the next 15 years, the voice is very, very biased. It's just International Planned Parenthood Federation and their affiliates. We have a direct influence on the outcome documents, on what is established, what is negotiated at the UN.
Some of the objectives of the UNESCO Sexuality Education Guidelines include teaching children at age 9 about sexual stimulation and the definition and function of orgasm, and at age 15, that both men and women can receive sexual pleasure with a partner of the same or opposite sex. The It's All One curriculum, also promoted by International Planned Parenthood, reveals the multiple manipulative tactics used to indoctrinate and sexualize children through CSE.
So you've seen this United Nations agenda now, and Miss Kay Griggs, who's the wife of an American colonel major, actually blew the whistle on this deliberate agenda. And in this particular series of interviews that are posted on YouTube called Illuminati Wife Tells All, it's 8 hours of interviews with her. I highly recommend watching that. It's very revealing because she explains that there's a deliberate agenda to rip American families apart via secret courts. So this New World Order agenda, which is what Nancy Schaefer focused on, is all about governments also removing children from parents by the hundreds of thousands every year. In Australia, 50,000 children a year are removed by the state. There's a bunch of other numbers here on this picture where you can see what's happening. In the United States, 1 out of every 25 children is placed in foster care. In the Netherlands alone, a country with 17 million inhabitants, an average of 20,000 children are removed from loving parents by the state every year, which costs taxpayers dollars 1.2 billion euros a year. You can see this. I have this Google Translate of a Dutch article that's all about thousands of children that go into hiding and families that are fleeing the terror of child protective services in the Netherlands. I know that they get like 80,000 euros per child that they remove, and they even have quotas that they need to meet every quarterly quotas. In the UK, the number of children stolen by the state adds up to about 10,000 per year. This foster care industry is insidious. It is federally funded, and children are literally for sale online. Parents' rights will be terminated upon request. I mean, it just says it right on the website. These particular two kids. We will terminate the rights of the child. Sorry, let me move this out of the way. The rights of all the children will be terminated voluntarily or involuntarily if you pay for these kids. And you get money when you adopt these children, right? I mean, it's a huge business. And in many of the foster homes, children are abused, molested, and also medically experimented upon. Speaking of which, medical kidnapping in all forms is also rampant and happening in hospitals as well. This is a wonderful website here, Medical Kidnap, that talks about how that is happening. Let's look at these expert human rights researchers that produced this report about legalized kidnapping. This was submitted to the European Parliament, and it talks about Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. All over Europe, parents take to the streets to protest this Nazi regime. And again, like I mentioned before, attorneys that are whistleblowers and other professionals that are talking about this get retaliated against, leading to loss of employment and jail time. There's an entire documentary here called Deconstructing America. There's 2 parts of this. I highly recommend it. You'll see a whole bunch of attorneys actually talking about the fact that they lost their jobs because they talked about this. There's an estimated $800 billion per year generated in the United States alone from this financial kids for cash child trafficking revenue machine through the judicial system. And you can read more about the AFCC that's heading a lot of this on this website here, the truth about the family court.blogspot. This is all about the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts that has concocted this racketeering scheme. And like I said, the money is also generated by Child Protective Services. Better not to report anything there because you'll have your kids taken away without a warrant even. Again, the money is also generated through the foster care system, right? It is a form of modern slavery. We got the pedophile mafia involved. This is an excellent website, very intense though, only for mature audience, about how these pedophile networks are entwined with governments, media, churches, and charities. The money is also generated by Big Pharma, of course, because, like I said, these kids are experimented upon and they're all given antidepressants once they're, once they're trafficked. So there's lots of money to be made, and Mainstream media is not covering this topic. They're not covering the 42 million of U.S. Victims of child sexual abuse. It is denial, and that's, you know, I don't know if it's denial, but we definitely are not seeing this much in mainstream media, if we see it at all. And, you know, judicial and government child trafficking, these topics are barely ever discussed by policymakers. As such, we can only conclude that the powers that be at the United Nations seem to have a vested interest in exercising control over the next generation, because it's much easier to control the next generation when kids are physically, psychologically, and emotionally damaged. I had author Aaliyah Hollands on the show, and she stated that this agenda is the essence of the Nazi Germany's developed trauma-based mind control techniques. Biggie, show us the next clip, please.
The mind protects itself, and if you look at it on a timeline, and at this point in time is that trauma, if the trauma is severe enough, what the mind does to protect itself, it builds amnesia walls around that trauma. Well, the Illuminati learned this a long time ago, and so what they do is they compartmentalize the mind. They take a small child and they just traumatize the heck out of it and split the mind and build all these amnesia walls between all these traumas. The worse the trauma, the better, because the better the trauma wall. So the most horrendous traumas you can possibly imagine are the ones that they want to use.
So these techniques were developed by the Tavistock Institute, and you can find more information on the Tavistock agenda on YouTube. Just put in Tavistock agenda or Tavistock, and you'll see a lot of YouTube videos on that. These techniques were further developed, they were developed in the Tavistock Institute and then developed by Joseph Mengele in Auschwitz and transported post-World War II to the United States via Operation Paperclip. So basically, they figured out this mind control, trauma-based mind control, and developed it, transported it to the United States. And the agenda here is to, it's a pro-abuse industry. If you have an abused child, chances are that this child will then also abuse his or her children later in life. So abuse breeds abuse, and trauma is the oil that keeps the pro-abuse revenue machine up and running, producing damaged generations that are easily manipulated to serve as compliant citizens in a global system that's dominated by an extremely small, mostly white male, powerful elite. And if you are not familiar with that elite, then I advise you to listen to this lecture by Myron Fagan, who had already exposed this elite in 1967. Next clip, please, Biggie.
The question of how and why the United Nations is the crux of the great conspiracy to destroy the sovereignty of the United States and the enslavement of the American people within a UN one-world dictatorship is a complete and unknown mystery to the vast majority of the American people. The reason for this unawareness of the frightening danger to our country and to the entire free world is simple. The masterminds behind this great conspiracy have absolute control of all of our mass communications media, especially television, the radio, the press, and Hollywood. We all know that our State Department, the Pentagon, and the White House have brazenly proclaimed that they have the right and the power to manage the news, to tell us not the truth, but what they want us to believe. They have seized that power on orders from their masters of the great conspiracy. And the objective is to brainwash the people into accepting the phony peace bait to transform the United States into an enslaved unit of the United Nations one world government. First of all, bear in mind that the so-called UN police action in Korea, fought by the United States, in which 150,000 of our sons were murdered and maimed, was part of the plot, just as the undeclared by Congress war in Vietnam, in which our sons are dying, is part of the plot, just as the plot against Rhodesia in South Africa, in which our sons will be dying, is part of the UN plot. However, the vitally important thing for all Americans, all you mothers of the boys who died in Korea and are now dying in Vietnam, to know is that our so-called leaders in Washington, whom we elected to safeguard our nation and our Constitution, are the betrayers, and that behind them are a comparatively small group of men whose sole objective is to enslave the whole world of humanity in their satanic plot of one world government.
Free-thinking mothers pose a big threat to the male entitlement control agenda of this elite. Therefore, they attempt to paralyze mothers through trauma inflicted by stealing their children and financial devastation through the global pro-abuse family court CPS regime. So we have several elements here. We've got paternal fascism, the control agenda, right? Women and children are a man's possession, which is domestic terror. We have corruption. We've got the financial incentive for unregulated income of court personnel, plus intentional federal funding to fuel the abuse through the AFCC, the HHS, and the other orgs that I mentioned. We have pedophilia. We got the moral corruption, and used also for blackmail and control and the child porn industry. We've got sociopathy, a rise in antisocial personality disorders through generational focus on possession and control of material possessions and humans. And we got the New World Order agenda to rip the family apart and control the next generation. And then we got ignorance about all of these previously mentioned issues by key players such as judges, attorneys, social workers, and all the family court personnel involved. It is a mix of all of these particular elements that's causing this. And I'd like to use this opportunity to express my concern about divisiveness amongst the different factions of activists, protective mother groups, and key individuals. Let's not waste our efforts arguing as to whether paternal fascism or ignorant judges or federal funding is at the root of this mommycide. All of the factions are correct. You are all correct. It is a tangled mess. That in the tangled mess of mommycide is a combination of paternal fascism, control, sociopathy, pedophilia, intentional New World Order pro-abuse, which is federally funded, plus, of course, the ignorance of some judges and social workers that are not educated in domestic terrorism, as well as ignorance of the general population on this topic. And to fight over which element is most crucial is a waste of time and a waste of resources and efforts. Any $3 trillion global judicial child trafficking scheme is set up by inserting divisive individuals in activist groups. My advice is to think for yourself at all times and observe activists who gossip and slander, whether they do that in public or in secret groups, and those who pin one individual against the other, those who trash efforts by others, those who tell you what to say or do, post or not to post, befriend or not to befriend. I mean, there are even activists who try to patent quotes and images about mommicide. I mean, come on. How can women have an ego when it comes to the genocide of mothers? I mean, some even say that these particular individuals are government implants to intentionally splinter collective efforts to achieve change. Whoever these individuals may be and whatever their intentions are, we need to keep our focus on one thing, and that's on getting our kids out of the hands of the abusive fathers, the foster care industry, and governments involvement, right? That is, we need to bundle our efforts together to be that tsunami of change. We don't all have to focus on exactly the same aspects of judicial child trafficking to accomplish that. Let's respect our diversity in these efforts instead of attacking each other on it. Again, as long as we fight amongst each other, we are not fighting the system very effectively. So, you know, these judicial child traffickers, they must laugh at that silliness and walk away with $3 trillion in cash every year, you know, while they traffic and rape our kids. That is what's going on, and that's what we need to counter. So let's take a look at some of the cases that I started collecting in this database to share with the audience that in this particular database, I think I have about 600, something like that, 600 moms in here. Again, these are all links. You can click on these names, and these are all will take you to petitions, YouTube videos, websites. And when you look at these cases, and they go, you know, it's just an endless scroll-a-thon, all these cases are in essence the same. They all follow that 5-step script that I talked about. On a global scale, protective mothers are judicially retaliated against when speaking out about their cases in public. So it's great that we do have these public cases. We need to have that happen more often. You know, often when they talk about their cases, they get gagged, and that flies in the face of the basic human right called freedom of speech. And as a result, thousands of mothers congregate in closed and secret Facebook groups and via encrypted messenger apps to seek all types of support: judicial, psychological, emotional, spiritual, financial, you know, just in order to make it through the torturous ordeal and to prevent suicide and murder. And as such, the pandemic is hidden. If protective mothers speak up and take action, they get often bribed through contact with their kids, right? In exchange for a few extra minutes of supervised visitation, they must promise not to expose their cases. That is nothing but judicial extortion and blackmail, using the kids as bait. Playing with the sacred mother-child bond like this is a form of child abuse on par with physical and sexual abuse of children. And I've talked about this before, that the mothers who talk about their cases get jailed, and some get murdered, the kids get murdered. The idea of hell is for children is to bring the hidden epidemic out into the open. Only by exposing the judicial child trafficking agenda and the individuals involved, and then going after these individuals, can we achieve lasting change by discouraging this agenda and turning the tide 360 degrees. Now, protective mothers who fear retaliation can also appear under a pseudonym on this show or in disguise. And activists can come on the show and share their insights and solutions, each of which are respected on this show. Because mainstream media is not covering this topic, and this is one of the reasons why I started this show on the CCN network, and I'm very grateful to the CCN network for allowing protective mothers to air the truth unfiltered. That is just wonderful. The archives I already shared where you can find the archives. They're also on my website. Scroll up here and share my screen. If you go to my website and you go to media and you click on the CN Live TV button, then it'll take you to the archives. And it is, of course, my hope that this show will reach policymakers and law students and social work students who are not yet caught up in this New World Order scheme and who actually give a damn about this generation of kids and generations to come. There are definitely politicians who are getting the point. Here we have one of them. We have Attorney General Eric Holder, who states, why are mothers who are the victims of domestic violence losing custody of their children to the courts? Do children need a relationship with their fathers even when their fathers have been abusive to them and there are mothers in the past? If so, what does that relationship look like? That's, very good points. But my question is, what is he doing about it, right? We definitely need more than just talk. We need action. And one of the organizations that's putting forth legislation to stop this parental alienation nonsense being used against protective mothers is the Stop Abuse campaign. Highly recommend that you visit this website. These are wonderful people putting together an awesome effort to get the Safe Child Act passed to protect children in family court nationwide and hopefully also internationally, fighting this discredited research like parental alienation syndrome and making judges actually look at evidence. Some recent implementation of court reform in the UK is also heading in the right direction.
Kyle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an issue that has been wreaking untold devastation on victims of domestic violence. I have now spoken to numerous survivors of abuse whose accounts of torment under cross-examination, often by convicted rapists, in the family court are devastating to hear, but are impossible for most of us to even imagine. I've spoken to a woman who was cross-examined by the man who was in jail for numerous counts of rape and abuse that left her unconscious and hospitalised. As a result of the family court process, this extremely vulnerable woman needed weeks of medication and months of counselling to recover. She has now suffered this ordeal 3 times. I have spoken to the sister of a woman who was abused so grievously it resulted in her death. The convicted murderer then sued for custody of their child from prison where he was serving a life sentence for murder. He directly cross-examined the sister of the woman he murdered, even having the grotesque nerve to ask, "What makes you think you can be a parent to my child?" Mr. Speaker, abuse is being continued, perpetuated, right under the noses of judges and police, the very institutions that should be protecting the vulnerable with every sinew of state power. On September the 15th last year, in response to speeches from members from both sides of the House during a backbench debate, the Parliamentary Undersecretary of State for Justice said that this was a scourge which blights our society, yet he made no commitment to review or to change policy. Sadly, it took the excellent coverage of The Guardian over the Christmas break for that to emerge from the Justice Department. However, the source was anonymous. So can the Minister please give clarity in the following areas? Lord Justice Mumby, the President of the Family Court Division, supports measures to outlaw the cross-examination of victims by perpetrators. He said that this would require primary legislation. Does the Minister agree with this assessment? If so, will he prioritise the drafting and introduction of any such legislation as a priority?
This is Peter Kyle in the UK Parliament talking about family court reform measures to protect protective mothers and their children from abusive fathers, which is wonderful. We also have Resolution 150 that is presented by Texas Representative Mr. Poe. And this is also about making sure that child safety is the first priority of custody and visitation adjudications. No, I'm not saying that word correct. And that state courts should improve this where family violence is alleged. A full-fledged documentary about Mommycide really is in order at this point, and you can contact me if you're interested in doing that. If you want to keep track of the war on mothers and children, you can find my Facebook page here and like it, and you'll get the latest on the front lines on the war on mothers and children in your feed. There are many wonderful protective mother activists. There is the Women's Coalition. They have, many great activities and actions. You can follow them here on their website, the Women's Coalition International.org. We got the Mothers of Lost Children. This is a wonderful website with lots of articles about our plight. We have the Stop Abuse campaign, of course, that I already showed you, and we have the Nurtured Parent with Patrice Lenowitz. And her main focus here is on making sure that the mothers take good care of themselves so they can fight back in an effective way. And there are many, many other organizations out there. Please don't feel offended if I didn't share your organization during this show. There are also tons of Facebook groups, most closed and some secrets, where thousands of protective mothers support each other. And if you need contact, just let me know. Let's focus on some solutions now. In order to end the pro-abuse profit industry and end legal abuse inflicted by abusive fathers, in my opinion, what could help would be custody insurance. If that is made available and made mandatory for all parents involved in custody battles, it would guarantee equal legal representation for both parents. Any individual employed in family judicial procedures should receive a mental health screening, should be thoroughly trained in recognizing all forms of domestic violence, including all forms of coercive control. And these individuals need to be paid an equal hourly average government wage to prevent these profit incentives. All suspected child abuse cases should be handled in criminal court through jury trials. This is just my opinion, If you're abusing a child, that's a crime. It needs to go into criminal court. And this includes maternal deprivation, right? As we already seen, that is considered a severe form of child abuse by experts. Any type of family court procedure should consist of juries to prevent judicial discrimination by individual judges. Audio-video recording of all court procedures should be mandatory in all courtrooms in order to provide complete transparency and accountability. Judicial immunity needs to be abolished. Judges must be held accountable for their decisions at human rights tribunals. Domestic terrorists should be prosecuted. Let's face it, these individuals are just not only damaging to children, but entire families. Let me share my screen here. Some artwork I've done on that particular topic. We don't need fathers like this, parenting our kids. All educators at all levels of education need to be informed of what adverse child experiences are so they can detect and prevent this at the children they have in their classrooms. Sociopathy and pedophilia. can be detected by MRI brain scans, and research needs to be conducted regarding timely and effective prevention of its manifestation. A massive global manhunt should be set up to go after the pedophiles. I mean, we're going after, the system is going after protective mothers, but it needs to be the other way around. And when pedophiles are tracked down, they should be jailed for life. Life in prison for whoever engages in any type of forms of pedophilia. This particular petition was made to introduce Jessica's Law, and Jessica's Law mandates a minimum sentence of 25 years and a maximum of life in prison for first-time child sex offenders. I'm all for that. Domestic terrorism should be labeled as a crime and made punishable by law. Now, in the United States, women and children have no constitutional rights. The U.S. Congress must change this to ensure equal human rights. The U.S. must pass the Equal Rights Amendment and ratify the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women as well, and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, including the optional protocols. In the Netherlands and other European countries, children have no constitutional rights either. So this must change as well. The European Parliament must force European countries to adhere to the European Constitution regarding children's rights. And I have a Google Translate of these rights of the child according to the European Constitution, if you're interested. All around the globe, Child Protective Services agencies get financially rewarded for every child they remove from perfectly fit, loving parents. CPS works kind of like the Gestapo officers of the family courts. Look, the focus should be on the prevention of child abuse instead. And when Child Protective Services agencies fail to prevent child abuse, they should be fined for every child that needs to be removed instead of rewarded, right? Because it means they didn't do their jobs well. So we need a massive audit into each country's federal funding of any program related to child abuse and domestic violence, federal fatherhood crap, and needs to occur to ensure that the funding is not misappropriated and not discriminatory, right? And regarding international custody situations, the international custody community in family court must facilitate protective mothers with the ability to relocate to their country of origin. Expert evidence of domestic violence, child abuse, and child molestation must trigger that Article 13 that we looked at of the Hague Convention Treaty. In today's global mobile society, there should be global jurisdiction of children. And additionally, expert testimony and evidence from one country's court should be allowed in all other countries as well. And all judiciary actions should be executed in English. An international multidisciplinary United Nations Judicial Oversight Committee must be created to ensure proper implementation of the Hague Convention Treaty by its judges and central authority in all participating countries in order to prevent human rights violations of protective mothers and their children. Then again, as mentioned previously, the United Nations appears to be the root of all this evil to begin with, so we must ask ourselves whether we will stand by and allow rogue, unethical treaties disguised as human rights agreements to ruin family lives. Protective mothers can safely go public about their cases without fearing retaliation. You need to collect evidence. You need to stay safe in cyberspace. Check your devices for spyware. Save your files on Swiss encrypted cloud servers. Use protonmail.com, which cannot be hacked or tracked. Set up anonymous websites. Put your case online. Leave the father's name out and change the first names of your children, right? That way you can focus on the authorities in your case, the judges, the attorneys, the CPS workers, the evaluators. Stay with integrity, stick to the facts, and show screenshots of the evidence that you have, and remove the last names on the documents that you share, so you're safe, right? Share your story in various versions, long and short. You know, make easily shareable blog posts, add pictures or videos to make it enticing. Bite-sized amount of information works best on social media. And if you share the blog post on social media, it'll bring visitors to your site and bring awareness to your case. You can create memes just like I do, you know, create a hashtag for your case that people will remember, and start creating court watches for every hearing that you have, or that another protective mother that you know has. You need to have court watches going on. You know, so this is stuff to, you know, bring your case out in the open in a safe way, okay? And contact me if you want to share your story on Health for Children. When you do participate in mainstream media or documentaries, only sign release contracts after you have seen the final edit, because otherwise the information that you provide might be used in a different way than you intended. The more websites we have, the more media stuff we have, the better we can make a fist and hold governments and their judicial systems accountable for their role in the lives of all children around the globe. Amendment and enforcement measures to existing legislation and run-amok kangaroo court practices must be created in order to stop court-ordered child trafficking to abusive fathers and state agencies, and stop the disappearances of children. There's an estimated 2 million children disappear every year. If you go to the Missing and Exploited Children website, you can find those figures there. That means that, you know, I mean, 2 million children a year disappearing. I would like to know where these children go. They don't just evaporate. You know, we need to take the financial incentive out of the equation in order to stop this nightmare. Human rights and financial incentives don't ever mix. We need to hit the judicial child trafficking perpetrators where it hurts by exposing and suing each and every one of the human rights violators. The fathers, their attorneys, social workers, judges. You need to fight pro se if you can in your country, because you know your case the best, and you will fight for your child like no attorney ever will, you know. File complaints against unethical attorneys with the state bar of the state that you're in. Describe the violations of their code of conduct violations, and mention the exact article of the code they violated. Attach exhibits of evidence and explain the consequences for you and your family. Demand reallocation of custody and monetary sanctions awarded to you and your children, and demand that the attorney is disbarred. File intentional torts against the fathers, their attorneys, guardian ad litems, social workers, and file for emotional distress, defamation, false light, loss of consortium. Demand reallocation of custody and monetary sanctions, right? You need to go after them. File civil rights suits against lying CPS social workers. Again, you need to demand reallocation of custody. Now, one of those wonderful attorneys that teaches you how to do that is Sean McMillan. Here are on YouTube, you can find the nuts and bolts of filing a civil rights claim. This attorney is just wonderful. He is fighting the system, and he's successful. He actually helped a mother here and her daughter sue Orange County, California, after the daughter was taken from her mother. And both the mother and the daughter were awarded a huge sum of money. And of course, it's not about the money, but what you're doing here is making it more expensive for the states to do this, and that it creates revenue for them. So we need to flip the script, right? Make sure the system pays more money than that it makes. File complaints against unethical psychological evaluators and supervisors with the Judicial Council of your state or country. File complaints against judges at the Supreme Court review level and the Federal Court review level. It helps if you include references to similar cases of the same judge, as well as if you have amicus briefs from nonprofit organizations who support your case and other cases. Now, what was brought to my attention here is that judges actually take out malpractice insurance. That means that you can go after that as well here on weightiermatter.com. Why judges are afraid? You'll figure it out, because they do have legal malpractice insurance, and this is an angle that we need to go after. We need to demand judicial accountability and end judicial immunity. All supporters of domestic terrorism, whether they're judges, attorneys, social workers, whatever, they all must be held accountable for their human rights violations at the Human Rights Tribunal in The Hague, as far as I'm concerned. We need judicial oversight committees to end court corruption and CPS corruption. And there are many efforts, happening to make that, to go in that direction. This is one of such articles, why all 50 states need to overhaul their judicial oversight committees, right? We need to massively file United Nations petitions. If your case is international, you must make sure the country you're filing a UN complaint with has ratified the optional protocol before you file. One such UN procedure you can go after here is the Treaty of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. If you are in the United States, you can file complaints with the Organization of American States, which is kind of like the United Nations of the North, Central, and South Americas. We need to abolish fathers' rights funding. So approach your local and national policymakers and even the president to demand this and to abolish such discriminatory funding. Organize locally and pursue this. We need to stop judges with a track record of awarding custody of kids to abusers from getting reelected. And the way to do that is to massively attend public hearings during election rounds and speaking out about the cases in which that particular judge for re-election who has judicially trafficked kids to abusers, to hold them accountable. We need to march at the White House with the mothers of lost children who are doing this every year, twice a year. You could organize court watches for every hearing that you have. And an example of such a court watch can be found on my website, where you can learn how to put this together and contact the presiding judge of your case and have everyone do that massively. We need to march at every local courthouse during hearings of protective mothers. We need to address law students, sociology and psychology students, criminology students, students who study human trafficking, students at local police academies. Let's focus on education, right? And children of all ages should be taught what type of parental behavior is acceptable and what not, and how to safely report abusive parents. Let's instill values of freedom, respect, and collaboration towards a sustainable planet instead of greed, materialism, ego, and sexualization and consumption. We need to make sure that CPS workers are properly screened. And of course, I'm always open to hear from others who have solutions that I haven't mentioned. I mean, these are just my ideas, you know. Last but not least, children need to be allowed to have a voice in what happens to them. Their voices must be heard. Their stories must be taken seriously. You know, children can very well voice what's going on with them if they are in a safe environment, and they have the right for their human rights to physical and sexual safety. We owe it to our children, to ourselves, to future generations and humanity as a whole. Really, we need a massive global strike and demand the return of the millions of stolen children. Watch David Icke as he calls for action in the last clip that I'll share with you. Biggie, please share the last clip that we have.
About 20 years ago now that I began to understand not just the scale of pedophilia and child abuse and child abduction and all the rest of it, but the people and the level, cesspit level, known as the elite level of our society, which is driving it. And we need to understand that this child abuse, this pedophilia, this systematic stealing of children from loving parents by state social services networks is not happening in isolation from the network and structure that holds billions of people in servitude to the few. It is fundamentally connected for this reason. Is people think that it's not my problem. It's not my child. It's not my freedom that's been taken away directly. It's not me having to knock on the door in the middle of the night saying we want your child. But it is. Because if we don't draw a line in the sand now, then it will be your child eventually. It will be you. What did they say? What did that pastor say after Nazi Germany? First they came for the Jews and I was not a Jew, so I did nothing. Then they came for the communists and I was not a communist, so I did nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists and I was not a trade unionist and I did nothing. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me. That is the road we're walking down. Anyone's injustice is our injustice. That's the only way to bring an end to this. We need to come together, not just talk about it, but start organizing mass non-compliance, the non-comply dance, dancing to a different drum. We're not having it anymore.
I'm all about something like a global strike. Peaceful disobedience sounds great. I mean, ultimately, we are fighting a spiritual warfare, a war that is often perpetrated by mostly white men with an imperialist agenda that spans thousands of years. And this agenda has always been about control and power. Since women have gained financial independence since the 60s, men apparently feel threatened about their loss of control over women, and mommycide is the resulting pathetic war they have launched as a result, calling us femi-Nazis. I mean, look, for a man to intentionally recruit others to sever the most sacred bond of all, the mother-child bond, is the worst action to ever take, as it goes against every natural law of creation on this Mother Earth. Pedophilia is the worst crime against humanity, and all viewers need to realize that watching child porn is the equivalence of committing child rape. If you are an abusive father or someone helping an abusive father to steal his own children from their mother, please realize that you will be held accountable for your unholy and downright evil actions in a court not of this earthly dimension, in the court of your own ultimate consciousness. What you reap is what you sow. The robbing of children from their protective mothers is the most inhumane and cruel experiment of all ages, and you will pay the price one way or the other. I promise you that. Every domestic terrorist and their flying monkey helpers and passive onlookers will be held accountable by many means necessary. We can take a page from Native Americans and their attitude regarding the role of women in the community. Native Americans respect women and make protection of women and children a priority. They consult with women, for they know women have access to information they might not have. After all, women's brains are wired differently than that of men. Differently, not better, not worse, differently. It is our diversity that is needed to collectively fight for the protection of the most vulnerable of creation, our children, our animal kingdom, our ecology, and our earth as a whole for generations to come. Like Chief Sitting Bull said, let's put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. Thank you so much for your attention. This has been a 3-hour presentation spanning 2.5 years worth of research, and I couldn't compress it more than this. So thank you for hanging in there with me. And again, I hope this 3 hours will somehow get a professional documentary maker to do like an 1.5-hour movie on this that we can show worldwide to turn the tide, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Geerte. That was an amazing presentation, beautifully put together, and lots of interesting tips and pointers in there, lots of solutions-orientated material, but also really good in terms of giving people idea of where to take action, how to take action, because it's there are so many problems that we face in the world and not many people know how to go about sorting them out. So thank you very much for all of that amazing, amazing body of research. And I really do hope that we can bring more light to this particular darkness and help protected mothers and abused children around the world in whatever way we can.
Thank you so much, CCN, Mel and Biggie, for allowing me to share this information. And thank you for watching another episode of Hell is for Children, and I hope to see you all again next week. Bye-bye, everybody.